Copwatch, policing the police every single day.
I will call the meeting of the Code Enforcement Board for the City of Punta Gorda to order today. As a preliminary matter, I ask all of you that have cell phones, would you please turn them off? Put them on vibrate if you're expecting a call, but I do not want to hear any ringing, please. Would you please take the roll?
Edward Weiner,
Here.
Paul Sacalato,
Here.
Jane Adelson,
Present.
Nora Jardina,
Here.
Roland Erickson,
Present.
Henry Bauman,
Here.
John Shalavo.
Present.
Minutes for last month's meeting have been distributed.
Motion.
A motion to accept the minutes?
Seconded.
Motion accepted.
Comments?
Pardon?
Comments?
For the minutes?
Yes.
Yes, if you have any additions.
On the last page was minutes. There was a discussion about the case that was being presented today. And Mr. Levin explained to the board that the board would make a determination based on the evidence and testimony presented and not on the constitutionality and legality. Just wanted to be clear, it's not clear in the minutes that at that time, Mr. Levin was speaking as prosecutor and not as the advisor to the board. And I think the minutes should show that.
Would you please again, that he was speaking again as what, Mr. Nelson?
I'm sorry?
Say again what your concern was?
Well, my concern is that it's not clear in the minutes who Mr. Levin was representing when he made those comments about the role of the board. And he was speaking as prosecutor, not as the board's counsel.
Mr. Levin, would you care to comment on that?
I think I was speaking generally as a city attorney, not with respect to a case that was at that time before you, but I think the point is well taken, that as this case is going to be heard today, I am the city's prosecutor and not advisor to the board, and David Jackson is here, who is the advisor to the board, and any comments that I make would be considered to be argument and not advice to the board.
And so we should reflect that in the minutes?
I think that would be helpful, yes.
Do we hear a motion to amend it?
I guess I'd make a motion to amend the minutes to reflect that Mr. Levin's comments were not as counsel to the board, but rather as the city attorney and representing the prosecution.
Well, I think the minutes ought to be amended just to reflect all comments during that session. Because it's very generalized, so.
That's acceptable.
Okay.
So I withdraw my second to the motion to approve, and I'd like to see the minutes amended before they're approved.
Okay.
I'll amend my motion to reflect same.
Okay, we have an amended motion to indicate that the parties speaking that thing were, as you said, John, just in general?
Yes, it was a generalized comments according to the meeting. So I think the minutes ought to be amended to reflect exact comments.
We all understand the motion as prepared.
Well,
And if I might just state a little bit further so that the record is abundantly clear. The discussion had to do with the questions regarding the interpretation in general of the recently adopted sign ordinance. And the questions were being posed to me as the city attorney who had a hand in drafting those ordinances. And therefore, as I said, it was of a general applicability based on an interpretation of the code and the Code Enforcement Board's responsibility and obligations and jurisdiction to enforce those provisions, which was in the nature of general comments made in the context of the city attorney, not as the prosecutor in any particular case.
And specifically, I had made a comment that it is not the board's determination whether the ordinance is legal or not. Our job here is to determine whether a specific ordinance that has already been passed by city council has been violated or not. If the ordinance has been violated, then we find the respondents guilty.
Right.
Once again, I'll amend my motion to reflect what Mr. Cholifan has described.
I think the amendment should be for that section of the minutes that the comments contained herein are a general nature of the parties on the matters that will be considered.
I'll
Just
amend
a-
my motion to what he said.
Okay. As presented, all those in favor of the motion?
Do we have a second to the
I thought we
amendments?
did.
Second, Giardina.
Okay?
We have a second? If we do, then as the motion presented, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, so you've accepted the amendment. We need to have a vote again on approval of the minutes as amended.
Okay. I'm requesting a motion that we approve the minutes as amended.
So,
Motion has
moved.
been, and it's so, second.
Seconded.
Any discussion on the motion? Further discussion? Hearing none, may have a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, as amended. You have it.
I will want to go back to the recording.
Probably. Next meeting is August 18th, and we will get into the substance. All those who plan to speak before this board, would you please rise and be sworn? And as you testify, would you please indicate that you have been sworn?
Anyone intending to offer testimony in today's proceedings, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in today's proceedings?
I do.
All right, you may take a seat. When you're ready to speak, please come to the podium, state your name, and indicate that you have been sworn. Thank you. And I would ask all members to please make sure that they are speaking directly into their mics. It's a little hard to hear at times. Could you please move yours a little closer to your mouth, Mr. Nadelson? Thank you.
First case, contest of citation 20-50-71, case number 21-79906. Police officer William Gorman, badge 711. Respondent Andrew Bryant Sheets, violation of Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13, Sub C 8, and violation of Chapter 26, Section 11.1, Subchapter Z, display of indecent signs.
Mr. Chair, that was, should have been
I'm sorry.
section 11.5.
As corrected, 11.5 Z, display of indecent signs. Mr. Sheets present?
Yes.
Would you please?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Ferris Hine, I will be representing Mr. Sheets in this proceeding. Attorney.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, before we begin, got an indication we want to have a little discussion on some preliminary matters regarding this case and the next 4 cases on your agenda. We could go through that and make this discussion, this preliminary discussion.
Excuse me, can
Yes.
you please state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, David Jackson.
Thank you.
Advising the board here this morning. So yeah, my intent is we have a little discussion on some preliminary matters regarding these cases and have this discussion be part of the record for each of the first five cases on your agenda to avoid duplication, if that pleases the board.
That sounds fine with me.
Okay. So again, just give a little background on how we got here. A lot of this is in your agenda, but just make sure we're all on the same page. Respondents in these five cases were issued citations for alleged violations of Chapter 26, Section 11.5Z pursuant to Punta Gorda Code Chapter 9A10. In accordance with Section 9A10D, the respondents timely filed written notifications with the city indicating their intent to contest the citations. Each case, the city issued an affidavit of violations and notice of mandatory hearing. Pursuant to Chapter 9A, Section 9A10G, the respondent's election to contest the citation serves as a waiver of the respondent's right to pay the fine initially assessed in the citation. And if the Code Enforcement Board finds a violation, the board may assess a fine and cost in accordance with Section 9A8. So you received some information regarding each of these five cases, and I want to try to clarify what exactly is in the Code Enforcement Board's purview as the triers of fact for these matters. It's your job to consider the evidence and the testimony presented to establish findings of fact, conclusions of law, as to whether violations set forth in the citations occurred. And if so, determine whether and how much of a fine and cost should be imposed. And that's it. Again, while you can receive some written materials regarding the constitutionality of the ordinance alleged to have been violated, determining whether or not the ordinance is constitutional is not within your purview. It should not be part of your determination. You don't have the authority to overrule City Council's decision to pass the ordinance. Further, the law provides that the proper form to address any such constitutional claims is through an appeal to the Circuit Court.
Mr. Jackson, what
Yes.
does the city need to do to establish a prima facie case?
I'm sorry, can you
What
repeat?
does the city need to do to establish a prima facie case?
I'm about to get to that. So again, Section 11.5Z is what's at issue here, and it provides that no person shall erect, display, wear, alter, maintain, or relocate certain specified types of signs in the city, which includes any sign which contains obscene language or graphics, and any sign containing fighting words or indecent speech, which is legible from any public right-of-way or within any public space, and which potentially can be viewed by children under the age of 17. So now the citations at issue here referenced indecent signs. In order to find a violation, you must look at the evidence in the code language and determine if the sign in question included indecent speech, which under the code is defined as language or graphics that depict or describe sexual or excretory activities or organs in a manner that is offensive as measured by contemporary community standards.
How are contemporary community standards established in this case, and does the city have an obligation to establish those before we can proceed?
That is, I don't believe there's any definitions of contemporary community standards in the code.
Well,
So that's
there are community standards established by the Supreme Court.
Well, that's that's what the board's determination is if this is,
So you say the city does not have an obligation to show that they went beyond the community standards that's a very vague concept. I don't see how we can find a prima facie case until we can determine what community standards are.
that's the board's discretion to determine what the community standards are. That's what you're doing here as,
So there's no legal definition here, and,
I'm not aware of one.
I mean, we're looking for you as help as our council.
I do not have a definition of what contemporary community standards are. That's a
Thank you.
determination to be made by the board. Perhaps the parties will have some input on what that means. I imagine that'll be part of their case. Again, that's the first element. If you make that determination, was the indecent speech legible from any public right-of-way or within any public space? That'd be the second element. And then finally, could the indecent speech potentially be viewed by children under the age of 17? And that's all I have on it.
Okay.
I know you received a memorandum from defense counsel. He's representing all the defendants or the respondents in all 5 of the cases. And the city's filed a motion to strike that.
Yes.
And the board's discretion, how you want to handle, if you want to have discussion regarding that motion, or hear from the parties regarding that motion. Could do that at this time. Again, make that part of the record for each of the 5 cases. That'd probably be appropriate.
May I respond to the motion? It's actually a motion, and it should be a response. Typical court procedures.
Do you want to address the motion first and then have them respond?
Certainly.
Yeah. I think that'd be
For the record, David Levin, City Attorney, and I'm acting in capacity of the City Prosecutor. As you are aware, the Defense Counsel filed a memorandum of defense on behalf of the respondents in this case. The principal argument made in that memorandum was contesting the constitutionality of the ordinance that's has been cited to be violated by the respondents. I filed a motion to strike and memorandum of law in support thereof, presenting the argument that this is an administrative tribunal that has very limited jurisdiction, clear jurisdiction separate and apart from the jurisdiction of the courts. The case law that I cited in my motion and memorandum in support thereof identifies that it is very clear that this is a quasi-judicial body, not a judicial body. And the function of this body is to consider the facts in light of the ordinance, but not to have any authority to make a determination of the constitutionality of the ordinance. That is strictly the purview of the courts, particularly the circuit court, which would be the first avenue of appeal of any decision that you make today. So to the extent that the memorandum of law submitted by the defendants presents a defense based on the constitutionality of the ordinance, I would submit that it would be inappropriate for you to consider that. And I also argue that it might even be a violation of the Florida Constitution for you to, as an administrative body, go beyond the scope of your jurisdiction and render an opinion and a decision based on your understanding or belief of the constitutionality of the ordinance. And so I moved to strike that memo so it wouldn't be considered by you in your deliberations and would not be part of the record in your deliberations, so that the record would be clear that whatever finding that you make is not based upon the constitutionality of the ordinance, but whether or not the evidence is presented and the text of the ordinance, in your opinion, constitutes a violation thereof. Thank you.
Mr. Jackson, I've got a question for you.
May I respond to that?
I've got a question for our counsel.
Let's,
Would you like to hear from?
Well, the question is whether or not, I received the memorandum at 4 o'clock in the afternoon yesterday, as a motion was with a lot of backup material. Is it fair, or is it appropriate for him to respond at this time? Or should...
Yeah, I believe it's fair if he wants to go. I'd like him to respond. I think he's prepared to make a response.
May I respond to counsel?
Can you go to the podium,
please, the podium where the microphone is. Thank
And
you.
that would be the chair's decision.
Okay, great. I'm not familiar with your proceedings here, so
Well, this is all novel to us, so, but yes, you may respond.
I will be asking questions along the way like where may I cross-examine the witnesses and so forth. But as far as the memo is concerned, lawyers have to be very careful. Appellate courts are always saying if you don't make the argument in the lower tribunals, you waive them in the higher tribunals. Mr. Levin will verify that, I think, in all candor. So that's a standard protocol. Attorneys must and are always careful to make all arguments possible. So at the very minimum, I'd like for this memo to be part of your record so that any appellate courts, any higher jurisdictions would know that these arguments are made. As far as striking them, I certainly can't say anything about the jurisdiction. Attorney advisor said you don't have jurisdiction to determine the constitutionality. I'll have to agree with them, not that I know I'm ready prepared to argue the law on that, but they're your court advisors, so certainly you have to take that position, that you have no authority to determine this ordinance is unconstitutional. However, you don't have to read the memo or look at the memo in view of, hey, I've got to determine the legalities of here. I don't know if any of you are lawyers, but it's difficult. You don't have to read the memo in that light, but certainly you can view the memo as understanding that the reason Sheets and Massey are so adamant about what they're doing is because there's a very strong argument that these ordinances are unconstitutional. It's not a fly-by-night, crackpot argument. Now, this goes to why they did what they did, the motivation in their signs, the wording in the signs. There's no facts without context. So the context that these gentlemen are not only here to exercise these rights, but to stand for the whole rights of the community is in a sense validated by the memo. Although you can't determine whether it's constitutional or not, you can say, well, there is a strong argument that this ordinance is unconstitutional. So that would go to the way you view the facts. So that's my response here. There's no need to strike it, but you don't go so far as to determine the constitutionality. It's just part of the record. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might respond?
Yes, you may.
So I understand what counsel is saying with respect to wanting to make sure that if and when he takes an appeal to the appellate court, he makes it clear to the court that he wasn't raising the constitutionality of the ordinance for the first time on appeal. Courts generally require that you exhaust your administrative remedies. And so I'll stipulate for the record that the defense counsel is making an argument with respect to the constitutionality of the ordinance. However, it is not appropriate for you to consider the argument that there's a strong and compelling argument to be made by the respondents that the ordinance is unconstitutional. That's not within your purview, as I indicated, and the record needs to be clear as to whether the determinations that you made today are based strictly on your findings of fact as it relates to the testimony and evidence presented today, and whether based on that evidence and testimony as a conclusion of law, it's a violation of the ordinance, and that the whole question of the motivation of the respondents, their belief with respect to the constitutionality of the ordinance are irrelevant factual matters for your consideration today. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes?
I'd like to make a motion.
Well, let me just make one comment before we get to a motion.
Okay.
I realize, as Mr. Nettleson said, some of this stuff came into us at the 11th hour, and a lot of us have responsibilities beyond this board. And when emails come in, I don't know about all of you, but I don't live attached to my computer. So when it comes in, it's almost, again, the 11th hour that I'm reading this. And I would ask that we have a motion that we accept these documents for the record, but that the board take no action on them and just include them for the purposes of our hearing. Would you entertain that as a motion?
My motion would be to strike the memorandum of defense to citations and memorandum of law in support of the motion.
Motion has been made. Is there any second to that motion?
Seconded.
And what exactly do you expect to achieve from my discussion, since we have a second?
Well, my motion is pretty clear that as our attorneys have advised us, I don't think this has any precedence in this case. Again, I reiterate that our job on this board is to hear the case of an existing ordinance, which is now before us, whether it was violated or not, whether the constitutionality of this case is relevant, whether I agree with the constitutional relevance of this case. It's totally irrelevant. So,
Well, I will tell you, I would speak in opposition to your motion, because I think since we have received documents from both parties, and it is probably most likely that all of this matter will be going forward to a court, that I would just as soon incorporate all these documents into this board's record and let the courts handle it from thereafter, rather than strike anything and not include it within our file. So, any other discussion on this motion?
I'd like to add that, I didn't, again, receive this document in my email until late in the evening last night, and I printed it out and started reading, and probably until midnight, and was up at 7 this morning and still couldn't get through it because I didn't have time to. So this is an 11th hour motion. I would agree that to leave them in there, but not to strike the initial motion, because I don't think any of us have had a chance to read the motion to dismiss.
Any other discussion? Yes, please.
Good, David Jackson. For the record, my advice to you would be to, I think the points from both counsel were well taken. My advice to you earlier was, I think, very clear, that the constitutionality of the ordinance should not be part of your determination. However, I would recommend that you leave the memo and the motion as part of your record going forward. But again, to make it clear on the record, my advice to you is your determination in these cases needs to be based on the testimony, the evidence, applying it to the ordinance, and not focusing on the constitutionality of the matter. That is to be decided in another forum.
Is it possible that because many of us have read it, that it could be concluded that the memos contaminated the decision of the board?
Well, anything is possible, but again, I would just encourage you, when making your determination, whether it's to find a violation or not, that it not be based on, we believe that the ordinance is unconstitutional. You need to find that it either met the elements as we went through, or it didn't meet the elements, and not look off to this other issue that's out there to be determined in another forum.
I'll amend my motion that we will allow, for the record, this document to be entered. However, it will not be considered in our deliberations.
Both documents, or just the one document?
Both documents.
Both documents.
Second, Jardina?
Okay, motion has been made to include both documents in the record of these proceedings, and it's been seconded. Any discussion?
I'm sorry, are you talking about counselor's document and counselor's document?
Both documents.
Yes, the memorandum and the motion to strike is.
I've got a question. Is the city's council made a motion in writing? Does that need to be seconded, and do we need to vote on that?
I think it would be appropriate for you to either grant the motion to strike or deny the motion to strike.
So someone needs to second it, and if we're going to leave the plaintiff's remarks in the record, we're going to have to deny the motion. Isn't that correct?
Do we have to take any action on the motion at all?
No, we're just including them in the record.
Okay, so
That was my
nobody,
thought.
so that motion has not been seconded, and we're going to leave it in the record.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think it's
it is seconded.
appropriate just to move it forward as being discussed as part of the record.
Okay.
All right, as the motion has been presented, any further discussion? Let's take a vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Nay.
1 nay.
Okay,
Motion
again, if I
carried.
could just indulge me for a minute. I think we're ready to move into the facts of the first case. So if I could just state on the record that that preliminary discussion we just had will be part of the record for each of the subsequent 4 cases on the agenda.
Yes.
Thank you. Unless we want to repeat it 4 more times.
No.
5 more times.
As far as to how this proceeding should go, do I get to question
What will happen is we will have your client plead whether he is guilty or not guilty. We will have the city present its case. There will be discussion. You will have an opportunity to ask questions of the witnesses. Will you be presenting witnesses?
No.
Okay, that's fine.
Counselor, if you're going to talk, you got to do it at the microphone, at the podium.
Yes, over here, please, so that,
I'm not talking now. I think you start with the
Okay.
statements.
well, doesn't matter. We'd certainly like to have your questions answered, but your client can take the podium.
Are you whispering now? You're not talking now?
I'm sorry, maybe you can't hear me. I was trying to get a handle on the procedure that this court's going to
Yes.
follow.
Can you please state your name for the record?
My name is Ferris Heindel. I'm an attorney for Mr. Sheets and Mr. Massey.
You've been sworn?
Well, I'm not going to be testifying, I'm going to be arguing. Typically, attorneys aren't sworn. We're to be officers of the court, and what we say is mainly argument, it's not fact. So sworn, fact witnesses get sworn.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with that. I have not been sworn either as the city
I
attorney.
know.
And I also want to point out, Counselor, we're recording this
Yes.
proceeding, and the microphone is that little black thing on the podium there, and the microphone is more or less limited in its scope of being able to pick up audio. So I want to make sure that you understand that anything that you say in this proceeding needs to be recorded, and that's why we're asking you to stand at the podium.
Very good. I'd like to make a closing at the appropriate time once the witnesses have been presented and questioned. And nothing further to say right now,
But
unless you have questions for
This is a
me.
request, that closing could be succinct rather than elongated. Do you want?
As succinct as I possibly can be.
Thank you.
That may not be that succinct. I'll try. Thank you.
Well, if you, do you want to stay with your client when he's at the podium?
I can, certainly.
Yes, my name is Andrew Sheets.
No,
I
just
have been,
before-
what's that?
We were slightly interrupted before we got to the stage.
All right.
The charges were presented, and you either, our mission would be guilty or not guilty.
Not guilty.
Thank you.
My name is Andrew Sheets. I have been sworn in.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Can I do my opening statement?
Not yet.
We have the
All right,
charges
sorry.
first.
I'll give you the buzzer when it's your turn.
All right.
Would the city please present its case?
Mr. Chairman, have you actually opened the case by reading the charges? I
Yes,
don't recall.
yes, we did.
Thank you so much.
Then we had a preliminary discussion, so we took a break from that.
Thank you so much. I'd like to call our first witness. Would you please state your name for the record?
Officer William Gorman, Gorman.
And by whom are you employed?
I am employed currently with the Punta Gorda Police Department as a police officer, and I have been sworn.
And what are your duties and responsibilities as a police officer?
As a police officer in the state of Florida, our duties and responsibilities would be that of enforcing laws, preventing crime, responding to emergencies, providing support services, and assisting in mitigating emergency situations.
And in the laws that you are responsible for enforcing, does that include ordinances of the city of Punta Gorda?
Yes, sir, it does.
And were you so employed on June 9th, 2021?
Yes, sir, I was.
On that date, did you receive a request to respond to a potential code violation at 410 Taylor Street?
Yes, sir, I did receive that dispatch call.
And is 410 Taylor Street within the territorial limits of the city of Punta Gorda?
It lies within the city of Punta Gorda.
And did you in fact respond to said request?
Yes, sir, I did.
Are you generally familiar with the city's sign standards contained in Chapter 26 Punta Gorda Code?
I am, sir.
Yeah. I'm, on the screen is our exhibit number 1. Do you recognize exhibit number 1 as the definition for the term sign as contained in the city's sign code?
And yes, sir, I do.
I'd like to show you city's exhibit number 2. Do you recognize exhibit number 2 as the definition of the term indecent speech as contained in the city's sign code?
Yes, sir, I do.
Now I show you city's exhibit number 3. Do you recognize exhibit number 3 as one of the types of signs prohibited by the city's sign code?
Yes, sir, I do.
I show you exhibit number 4. Does this photo appear to be taken from your body camera?
Yes, sir, it does.
And does this photograph appear to be an accurate depiction of the scene upon your arrival at 410 Taylor Street on June 9, 2021?
Yes, it does.
Where were you standing when the photograph was recorded?
At this point, I'm exiting my city patrol car, and I'm approximately 10 to 15 yards away from that particular individual.
Were you standing within a public space?
I was in the parking lot, center of the parking lot.
And is that a public space?
Yes, sir, it is.
And what building is located at 410 Taylor Street?
410 Taylor Street is the county tax collector's office, the driver's license office, and registration office.
Is that a facility that has members of the public coming and going throughout the day?
Absolutely.
And who is the person that's facing you in city's exhibit number 4?
The individual facing me there is Andrew Sheets.
And how are you familiar with Andrew Sheets?
Through the course of interactions with as a police officer within the city.
And I show you city exhibit number 5. What is Mr. Sheets, is that Mr. Sheets depicted in exhibit number 5?
Yes, sir, it is.
And what was Mr. Sheets doing in this photo?
He was holding up that particular signage, a flag, if you will.
And is the photo an accurate depiction of the scene as you saw it at the time?
A true and accurate depiction of what I observed.
Was Mr. Sheets standing within a public space?
Yes, sir, at that, he was.
Was Mr. Sheets holding a sign as that term is defined by the city's sign code, as you understand it?
Yes, sir.
Did the sign that Mr. Sheets was holding contain indecent speech, as that term is defined in the city's sign code, as you understand it?
Yes, sir, it did.
And what word or words on Mr. Sheets' sign did you find to be indecent speech, as that term is defined in the city's sign standards?
It would be the black letters above the word TRUMP, and that word phonetically would be F Frank, U Union, C Charles, K King.
What was the approximate time of day of your observations of Mr. Sheets?
This was approximately 9:30, 9:40, before 10 a.m.
Was Mr. Sheets holding his sign in an area where his sign could potentially be viewed by children under the age of 17?
Yes, sir.
I'll show you city's exhibit number 6. What was Mr. Sheets holding in his right hand?
In his right hand was what appeared to be the Punta Gorda City Council photograph with some verbiage written within that photograph.
And Did the sign, and for the record, I've enlarged a portion of exhibit number 5 to focus, number 6 to focus on specifically the sign that we're speaking of. Did the sign that Mr. Sheets was holding in his right hand contain indecent speech, as that term is defined by the city sign code?
Yes, sir.
And what word or words on Mr. Sheets' sign did you find to be indecent speech, as that term is defined by the city sign standards?
In the second row, you have the letter R. The next word would be phonetic spelling, C as in Charles, U as in Union, N as in Nora, T as in Tom, S as in Sam.
All right. Was Mr. Sheets holding the sign depicted on city's exhibit number 6 within a public space?
Yes, sir.
And was Mr. Sheets' sign that he was holding in his right hand in an area where his sign could potentially be viewed by children under the age of 17?
Yes, sir.
And now show you city's exhibit number 7. And what is Mr. Sheets wearing?
At that time, a black T-shirt with block-style white lettering.
Is the photo an accurate depiction of the scene as you saw it at that time?
Yes, sir, it is.
And is Mr. Sheets' shirt considered to be apparel?
Yes, sir.
Is it your understanding that apparel upon which words have been printed constitutes a sign, as that term is defined by the city's sign standards?
Yes, sir, it is.
Did Mr. Sheets' shirt contain indecent speech, as that term is defined by the city's sign standards?
Yes, sir, it did.
And what word or words on Mr. Sheets' shirt did you find to be indecent speech, as that term is defined by the city's sign standards?
On the back portion of the shirt, as we look at it there, it would be the white letters, top word, again, phonetic spelling of that top word would be F as in Frank, U as in Union, C as in Charles, and K, King.
Was Mr. Sheets wearing the shirt depicted in city's exhibit number 7 within a public space?
Yes, sir.
And was Mr. Sheets wearing the shirt in an area where his message could potentially be viewed by children under the age of 17?
Yes, sir.
Did you ascertain whether or not Mr. Sheets had previously received a written warning from the city for an alleged violation of Chapter 26, Section 11.5Z Punta Gorda Code?
Yes, sir. I had knowledge of that warning that was issued.
In fact, wasn't Mr. Sheets issued a warning on June 7th, 2021 for displaying a sign with indecent speech within the city of Punta Gorda?
Yes, sir, he was.
I'll show you city's exhibit number 8. Is that a true and accurate copy of the citation you provided to Mr. Sheets on June 9th, 2021?
Yes, sir, it is.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, I would move to enter exhibits 1 through 8 into the record.
Accepted.
I have no further questions and would offer Officer Gorman for cross-examination.
Thank you. May I proceed?
Yes.
I don't have an overhead. It'll be a little easier, so I might ask Mr. Levin to throw up some of his exhibits, if he would.
Yes, sir.
During this process. Officer, you're familiar with the actual ordinance based upon this charge, are you not?
Yes, sir.
And do you have a copy of the ordinance there, Mr. Levin?
The entirety of the ordinance, yes.
Just the body of the ordinance, not the definitions.
Yes.
Okay. Can you put it up on the overhead?
Well, what are you looking for? I've got the copy of the entire ordinance. I don't have an exhibit of the entire ordinance.
May
The
I,
exhibits that
may
you
I
just-
approach? May I show you what I'm talking about?
Yes, thank you.
It's easier than trying to describe it. Just the actual body body of the ordinance, okay? This is the actual body. This is the actual relevant section.
That's, yeah, that's, that would be Exhibit 3, correct? Is that the one you're referring to?
Yes. Correct, correct. Now, in order to do your duty as a police officer, you've got to fairly and apply the wording of these ordinances and their definitions. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So some of my questions are going to be as to whether these wording of the definition were fairly applied, because it's the board here that's going to be making a decision based on the ordinance. You don't expect the board necessarily to adopt your version of what these words mean and say, do you? You're not expecting the board to have to accept your understanding of the meaning of the words and the definition in this ordinance, are you?
My expectations about what their belief is, I can't comment on that. I
Okay.
can only comment on what our instructions were, what our memos were, and what words in those memos were enforceable.
Okay, would you agree with me then that the board can read these definitions in the ordinance for themselves, apply the facts to the ordinance to determine for themselves anew whether there's a violation here?
That could be possible.
Okay. Now, in this ordinance, it says, "and which can potentially be viewed under the age of 17. Did you make a determination whether their signs could be potentially viewed by people under the age of 17? Did you make that determination?
That determination was based on the public access to the area where we were.
Okay, so would you agree with me that any public access, wherever you are in any public area, no matter where it is, a legible sign can be viewed by anyone less than the age of 16?
Yeah, I object to the relevancy of the question. The question, he's seeking to contest the actual language of the ordinance and its applicability elsewhere. We have before you testimony regarding the specific location, time of day, and sign that was at issue in this case, and he can certainly render an opinion based on where it was that he viewed the potential violation, not with respect to any type of other hypothetical situation.
Mr. Jackson, since there's no one judge here and we're a group of 7 people, how are we to respond when there is an objection?
I will handle that as chair.
Well, we might all have an opinion.
Well, right now, it's,
I'm asking our counsel as to what the proper procedure is.
I would defer to the chair if he wants to get board input on it, or my advice on it, that's fine.
do we want to spend time on a discussion on this, or will you accept my decision? Okay, do you have any further comment on?
It was just a very simple question, can be answered very simply. I wanted to know, and the reason is, we need to understand this ordinance in order to apply it in this particular fact situation. We need to understand the meaning of the words. That's what our government's about. We lay out laws, and if they mean something, they do. If they don't, if they're too confusing, that's an issue. In this case, he has to make the determination whether the signs can be viewed by anybody less than 17. So I just want to know, is there anywhere, any place on earth that's a public area, or rather not on earth, in Punta Gorda, that a sign, a legible sign, cannot be viewed by somebody that's 17? If the answer is
think-
no,
I think, your question obviously is extremely broad in that area for this individual to answer, so I'll agree with city council that the motion should be, for what he requested.
Irrelevant.
It's irrelevant.
so what exactly did you do to make a determination by that this sign could be viewed by anybody that's under the age of 17?
Based on the ordinance, which clearly stated that could be potentially viewed by a person under the age of 17.
I mean, what did you do to make that determination? You have to make a determination or the ordinance doesn't apply, correct?
Mr. Chair. I'm probably the dumbest one here in the room, so I'm going to ask some really stupid questions. Have you ever been to the facility on Taylor Road that Officer Gorman has spotted the signs? It's a simple yes or no answer.
If I may, let's let him finish this cross-examination, and then you'll have an opportunity to question the other witnesses.
All right, just a simple question, sir. Did you make the determination, yes or no? I've got one follow-up question after that. It's very simple. Did you make the determination that these signs that you've been referring to could be viewed by someone under the age of 17?
Yes.
And what did you do to make that determination?
It was common knowledge. My knowledge allowed me to make that determination because of the public place, the public property that it's set on.
Because it was public property, okay. So in order to find a violation here, you've got to find one of the three things: that the sign contained obscene language or graphics, and any sign or fighting words or indecent speech. Is that the way you understand the ordinance? Is that the way you understand the
Yes, sir.
ordinance?
Did you read that exactly?
I didn't read it verbatim, it's right up here. You're gonna have to find, it's obscene, or it has fighting words, number 2, or indecent speech, one of those three.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Did you find any obscenity in the signs?
Yes, sir.
Obscenity?
Excuse me, I object to the question because it's not relevant. The charge in this case was that the respondent was holding an indecent sign as defined in the code. He was not charged with having a sign with obscene language or graphics, nor was he charged with a sign having fighting words on the sign. So the question should be limited to whether or not he determined that the sign contained indecent speech, because that's the relevant inquiry.
Okay, so now understand what the charges are.
Okay, I will accept your objection.
Thank you.
Okay, now all we have to, that's very good, sir, because now we can just focus on the indecent language, correct? The council here doesn't have to even consider the definition of obscenity or fighting words in making their determination. Do you agree on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. I'm trying to be succinct and fully represent my client, sir.
Hold on, just a second. Mr. Nielsen, you need to, I've been advised by the clerk that they can't hear you. You need to move that microphone close to your mouth.
I didn't say anything.
You previously have.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, sir. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay, so let's look at the definition of indecent, please.
That'd be exhibit number 2.
Here we go. I apologize to this board and anybody listening or recording if I use language that I wouldn't otherwise use. I don't know really how to get some of my points across. And I don't use that type of language, but I may have to use some F words or whatever to get my points across. Okay, let's look at the definition of indecent speech. Language or graphics that depict or describe sexual or excretory activities or organs in a manner offensive as measured by contemporary community standards. In order to find that those signs are indecent, officer, counsel, that there has to be a finding that the signs actually depict or describe sexual or excretory activities or organs. Would you agree with that? That you have to make that finding?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, each word would you agree with me that each word in this definition is important, such as it's important to understand and apply the word depict and what that means? Do you have a definition of depict, sir? Let me see if you agree with this definition. I pulled it off the Webster's Internet. You depict something, someone or something, you show what that person or thing is like, either with some kind of image such as a drawing, painting, photograph, or movie, or with words. You show what something is like. And would you also understand that the word described is important? Do you have a definition for describe that you apply when viewing this ordinance and its definitions? Sir?
Yes, sir.
What's your definition of describe?
The description of the word itself has been placed in a memo that says if those words appear, and they're clearly spelled out to the officers of this agency, that would be in violation. And that memo clearly used the F-U-C-K and the C-U-N-T word, and that's what we based this off of, because it was a 34-page ordinance. So with the assistance of the city, they elaborated and told us what words would be in violation of that. And that's, so now if you ask me to describe or to define certain things, I do not have a dictionary here with me, but I do have the city memo that says what we will enforce.
Okay, so I think it's important to me and this board to know that when you look at this, you're going by what you were told to say this means and not what you thought it means. Is that correct?
This is neither the time or place for my opinion.
Thank you.
Like you stated earlier, Counselor, there's certain words that I won't say, but that's me.
Well, the board, this board is not going to get that memo. It doesn't have to go by this memo. Would you agree with that?
Mr. Chair, I object to being schooled in English 101. I mean, this is a total waste of time.
Thank you. Could you move on? I mean, we are dealing with things we have general knowledge, ordinary
Very well.
definition.
I'm trying to make it clear that the board reads for itself and doesn't.
Yes, I
Okay.
think the board, if I can speak for the board, I think we know what the word depict and the word describe means, and we don't need a dictionary definition.
Well, I understand that you don't have to go by the memo as well.
So-
Thank you. I don't want to waste your time, sir. Lawyers have to.
Good job of it.
Thank you.
Continue, please.
All right. let's take some words using a fuck and see if they actually fit as indecent speech based on that deposition, that definition. What the fuck? Does that in any way describe something sexual? Give you a description or depict something sexual?
Excuse me, may I just interject? We're talking about the language on a shirt, not just general phrases.
That was a general phrase.
Well,
Used
yeah, but
commonly.
it's not, well, the signs that he had didn't have that phrase on it.
I understand that. Trying to
let's-
make some points here. That's what,
Let's stick with the sign itself rather than just generalities.
let me finish this, please, unless I'm instructed by, just a couple, it won't take but a second. This is very important. It's very important, and that's why these men are out holding these signs, is because they have issues with the constitutionality of this.
And I object again to any argument regarding the constitutionality of the ordinance.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. Okay, well, let's stick with the words that are, there are words that are commonly used with fuck. It doesn't have any sexual connotation, like fuck off, what the fuck, fucking idiot. You don't think when using those words, people are actually trying to get out a description of sex, do you?
Mr. Handel, again, if you don't mind, the board one, same time. I play golf, so I hear a lot of phrases using that term, but it's a phrase. It's not the signs that we're dealing with. It's a description, as the sign said, or depiction. Let's stick with the sign and the language on the sign.
You see,
Mr. Chair, and since council is having a difficult time with the English language, the word offensive in the last line is where everybody is heading. So what the fuck may be offensive to most of the people in this room? It may not be offensive to the two bozos sitting here.
All right.
Your Honor, I move to disqualify this gentleman from this proceeding. He's demonstrated animosity toward council, a prejudgment.
Send me the electric chair, Counselor.
No, I think he should be disqualified from this proceeding.
Let's try to keep the personal comments down.
Advisor?
Focus on the issues, please.
Mr. Chair, if there's no other direct questions for the officer that we haven't already heard, I think we need to go ahead and wrap this up and decide whether we have a prima facie case.
I agree with you.
All right, not completed.
But I do want to make sure that they have an opportunity to present their case full and fairly, so.
This gentleman here displayed what's exactly, when you interpret this thing, you don't just say, hey, was fuck you offensive? You have to determine whether fuck you actually describes sexual or excretory activities. Okay? It's just a phrase used.
Mr. Chair, again, I must strongly suggest that if the counselor doesn't have a direct question for the officer, that we proceed.
I have a lot of direct questions, sir. I'm just getting objections and interference from board members. It should be disqualified because they've already
Would you
prejudged the
please
case
get your questions?
and exercise animosity. I haven't shown any animosity to anybody in this room. Hadn't insulted anybody. I'm simply stating my case. A member should not sit on the code enforcement board that's going to insult an attorney representing a party or a party.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your comments on that. Do you have anything else? Will you have your client give any testimony?
Well, this, again, we need to determine whether we have a prima facie case, and
Well, just.
Well,
these are only direct questions for the officer at this point.
I can explain why you don't have a prima facie case, if you'll let me.
Sir?
You're going to decide it.
Well, that's,
Right.
we'll,
I'm just asking here. I'm not saying,
Board, if I can caution you, we've got some emotions flowing here. Let's take a breath. We got to remember that due process is important here. They need an opportunity to present their case. So let's let them finish what they're entitled to do in terms of questioning the officers and presenting what other evidence they may have.
Mr. Heidel, would you continue?
The reason you don't have a prima facie case because there was no indecency on the sign. I'll explain that to you. It's not enough just to say, hey, that was a kind of an offensive word. That's why this carefully written. These statutes need to be followed, and you get a chance to interpret it over and above how the police interpret it, because that's what the appellate courts do. That's what the judges will do, and apparently counsel's not objecting to this argument that you get to interpret these words, correct, Mr. Levin?
That is correct.
Okay, you get to interpret these words. You don't have to accept what the officers say. In order to find a violation, prima facie, yeah, fuck you can be very offensive, offends me. But when you hear it, they didn't raise it to get somebody aroused or display sexual. They say, like, it's a word of intensity. It's used commonly, intensity, in those examples I gave you. You not only have to find that, you have to find that the words describe sexual activities or organs in a manner offensive. You don't have to, the offense is just one of the words. Okay, those are just words. They're not words used in this context to describe sexual activity. Think about it. Every time the F word's used, is it about sexual activity or describing it? No. It's just a word of intensity. That's the context it's taken. I didn't write the statute. They did. So they had to live by it and apply it fairly and properly in this case.
Does the board have any questions for the officer?
I do. Officer, you referred to a memorandum. Was that distributed to everybody, all the officers in the department? A memorandum that stated what
I'm
words?
not sure who it was distributed
Well,
to,
but
sir.
you received a copy,
Yes, sir.
and approximately how many words were on that?
There was one distinct word on there. The second word that was used and cited within that was an obvious word.
Were there any other words, or are those the only two?
There was one word cited, sir. The other C word was an obvious word that fell into that indecent speech and discussed within the agency on how to go about enforcing the sign ordinance.
So there was just one word and the other one was obvious? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was an example, and then the C word is pretty obvious how it does.
Was there any attempt in the memorandum or in the training to refer to context that those words would be found objectionable? Or just the word itself, without any context, is objectionable?
Well, I will say that the F word has the power to insult and offend, and it derives from a sexual meaning. I mean, that's,
Thank you.
Officer Gorman, I have a question.
yes, sir.
When you approached Mr. Sheets, what was his reaction and what was his demeanor and his tone towards you?
Mr. Sheets was 100% cooperative. Mr. Sheets requested the citation, and when I left to go back to my vehicle, he said, come on, give me the citation. And he was cooperative the entire time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from board members? If not, I'll entertain a motion as to whether or not.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. There was a message that I was asked to take a look at. I would like to also, before you make a determination of prima facie, make an argument similar to Respondent's Counsel was, as sort of a closing argument of our case at this point. And that is that
Are there going to be any more witnesses, or is this the only witness?
no more witnesses from the city, no.
Thank you.
Just as counsel,
Well, do you want to do this now or at the end?
Right now.
Okay.
just as Respondent's Counsel he's not testifying, I'm not testifying, but he did say to you that he was reluctant to use the F word in this setting, and I assume, maybe I assumed incorrectly, but he was taking into consideration that this board might find that word to be offensive, and that and it would be offensive as measured by, you know, the community that we live in. And the word itself is what was the gravamen of the offense, not the context of the word. And so the officer just testified that the word, the two words, the F word and the C word, were words that he determined based on his understanding and his training of the interpretation of the ordinance, that those two words described a sexual activity or a sexual organ. And that it was in a manner and also in a location that would be considered to be offensive, and also in a location where it would be potentially viewed by children under the age of 17. And therefore, the elements of the offense, as cited by your board's counsel, have been met in this case.
Thank you. Okay. I would entertain a motion as to whether or not the city has or has not a prima facie case.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that the city has proven it has a prima facie case.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded that the city has established a prima facie case. Any discussion on that motion? Mr. Nettleson?
So, I think for the city to make the prima facie case, they have to establish that there are community standards that have been, the bounds have been stepped past. And community standards, it's a very broad, and it's up to the interpretation of, well, maybe it's the interpretation of you and me and of the officer, but the plaintiffs are also part of the community. So how do we establish what is a prima facie case? And I spent a lot of time over the last month thinking about this. I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of reading last night because we had some new things that were brought to our attention as to what we could and could not do as a board with regard to the constitutionality of this particular ordinance, which I'm not going to opine on, but I think it's important to look at what is obscene, all right, and what is indecent, and what community standards are. There's no real clear definition, but I came back to two Supreme Court cases, which I looked at, and the first one was Roth versus the United States, 1957. The court held that material being obscene depended upon whether the average person.
I know it's.
Please don't interrupt me, sir.
I would ask the board's attorney to determine whether or not independent research and argument by a member of the board is appropriate, particularly when it's addressing, again, the constitutionality of the ordinance.
I'm not addressing the constitutionality. I'm addressing what is obscene.
Well, obscene isn't even an issue before this board, so.
Well, indecent is. Indecent and obscene.
No, obscene is not before the board. Indecent is. Obscene is a separate definition, and it's not.
Are you
before the
testifying?
board. I'm arguing, sir, and I'm trying to make sure that the record is clear that we're not going to be considering evidence or words that were not within the charge. Otherwise, there would be a denial of due process, and I'm trying to make sure that that doesn't happen in this case.
To the extent that your discussion is regarding indecent and, you know, whether it's your collective determination violative of the contemporary community standards, I think you can go forward, but yeah, avoid the constitutional discussions, and obscene has been clear has not been part of the charge.
Well, I'm going to continue on. In that Justice Brennan said the dominant theme in the material has to appeal to the pure in interest.
Yes, and that's the Your Honor, again, that's the definition of obscenity. And if you're going to make that argument, Board Member Nielsen, you need to be fairly clear and open to what it is that you're reading from and what the definition is, and that is an obscenity case, not an indecent speech case. And again,
Well,
I want to make sure,
it speaks to,
it's my job, is
it
my
doesn't
job,
speak only to obscenity or indecent, it speaks to community standards.
that case was an obscenity case, was it not?
All right, let's talk about Miller versus California, where Justice Berger, in the opinion of the court, said, when the average person applying contemporary community standards would find the work as a whole appeals to the prurient interest.
Again, that's an obscenity case, Your Honor.
Well, it says community interest, it says community standards right in it.
It's a case interpreting obscenity standards. That's where prurient interest comes from, as defined in our ordinance.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Well, let Mr. Nettleton have his chance.
Yes, thank you. And further, it goes on to say whether the work depicts or describes a sexual conduct or extracurricular functions, I have trouble with that word, as defined by state law. That's very similar to language we have here. It's almost identical. But what isn't included is whether the work lacks serious literary, artistic, or political, scientific value. Only if all three
Mr. Nettleton?
factors can be satisfied can the speech rise.
I think your point is, you've discussed this. The question is, do we have a prima facie case? And
I don't think the city has shown that there are any community standards.
thank you. Mr. Weiner, you wanted to say something?
I wonder if I can ask for the street addresses for Mr. Sheets and Mr.
What?
Macy.
I'm sorry, I lost my page.
Okay.
Mr. Sheets and Mr.
Macy.
Well, this is,
Macy, sorry.
Massey.
Street address.
Why? The relevance?
It's relevant to what is in the document.
Are you wanting the address where the violations occurred?
No, I want their street address in Punta Gorda.
Where they reside?
Yes.
I don't think that's
how is
relevant.
that relevant to
Okay,
whether we have
on
a case or
page
not?
10 of counselor's pleading, by the fact that both parties to this case reside within Punta Gorda. I don't believe either one resides in Punta Gorda. One resides in Sarasota County, and one resides in Charlotte County. So,
Let me just inject, if that's something you want to pursue when the respondent is up, you could bring it at that time. Right now, we're just dealing whether or not the city has a prima facie case. I'd like to stay with that motion.
The motion,
call the question.
that motion's been seconded.
And the discussion, I hope, any other further discussion that's relevant to the motion? I'd like to have a vote on the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
One objection, motion passes. Respondent, would you care to, or your counsel, have anything further to add?
Mr. Sheets has a statement he would like to make. You may have a question for him, and then I would like to make a brief concluding remarks.
No. May I ask one, will this apply to all the other matters in which your client is before this board? Or do we repeat every one of them again for each of the succeeding?
I don't know that there's any uniqueness in the rest of the cases, is that correct, Mr. Levin?
Counselor, if you don't speak into that microphone, nobody's going to know what the hell you're saying.
And if I might, I think, let me just, you were asking questions of procedure, and that's fair because you may not be familiar with the procedure.
Yeah.
So the first thing that the board does is consider whether or not the city has proven a prima facie case. It's possible in many circumstances, or some circumstances, that the elements weren't proven by the facts that were presented, in which case there would be a finding that there's no prima facie case, the case ends, case dismissed. The board made a preliminary determination that there is prima facie evidence of the violation. Now, and you had the opportunity to cross-examine the witness as part of that determination. Now you have the opportunity to present your case in defense and you will have an opportunity after you have had your questions presented to your witnesses, and I have the opportunity of cross-examination if necessary, to make a closing argument at the end of your particular case in this case that's presently open. We have to make a record for each of the citations that have been contested, unless your client wishes to dismiss the contest as it relates to the other three the other two associated with him and whatever Mr. Massey wants to do. Otherwise, we are going to go through evidence and testimony and if necessary, argument in each of the other cases. You're welcome to incorporate by reference any argument that you made in a previous case in the record of the case that is next called. So hopefully that answers your question, and if I misstated, hopefully the board attorney will correct me.
Yeah, I think that's a fair process, since we're, if we want to try to avoid duplicity here with general arguments for both sides, we could do that.
Okay,
But yeah, we need to get the facts.
We'll try to move through this as succinctly as possible without waiving any rights, okay? Thank you. That's fine.
My name is Andrew Sheets, and yes, I have been sworn in. This is my statement for all the cases. My name is Andrew Sheets. I have been a reporter for Charlotte County Copwatch for 9 years. I have over 200 million views online and over 200,000 subscribers online.
Man, just slow down a little bit so that I can understand what you're saying.
Right? You want me to repeat it?
No, but just remember,
All right.
don't read so fast.
All right. And I fight government corruption and the police corruption every single day. Just like they investigate us every single day, I try to investigate them every single day. And in doing that, I make record requests and go into the government offices and record video of my interaction with the people fulfilling the record request and expose the corruption. And because of this activity, the city of Punta Gorda made an illegal law 2 years ago, making it illegal to record a public official in their public place doing their public duty. They have trespassed me from everywhere. They have literally forced me into the streets to let people know of the corruption in Punta Gorda. Now the city's attempted to censor my protest speech by banning words and phrases it considers indecent. But these words express my depth of my anger and frustration with the government, and I believe it is my duty as a citizen to confront this attempt to take away our freedom of speech. Yes, I use strong words, but that is because of how bad the corruption is and how strongly I oppose the city's attempt to deprive us of our constitutional rights. I would rather use the First Amendment instead of the Second. It is not my fault I am in the street. It's your fault. You trespassed me from everywhere. And now you have made it illegal for me to protest in the street. When and where will this end? We have the right to free speech and press, and you are violating it. It's in the Constitution, and you are knowingly violating it. I was also mentioned, he wanted me to explain what my shirt was. Fuck policing for profit. It is not about sex, not even close. It is about the police literally policing for profit. Our founding fathers freed our country to be free, and now everything is illegal, and the cops are enforcing victimless crimes. We have 6 stories at the courthouse because everything's illegal. I find that appalling, and so would our founding fathers.
Mr. Sheets?
Yes.
May I ask you a question? Do you think that those words are offensive to children?
I would object to that question unless we use the whole statement under indecent. They don't just have to be offensive. The words also have to depict or describe sexual or excretory activities or organs in a manner that is offensive. If we're going to ask him that question, I would object to it being parsed in piece that reflects a total misapplication or misunderstanding of this definition. So I would object that would be questioned in that form.
If I might, and I'll let the board attorney chime in, I don't know, since you are sitting in a quasi judicial capacity, I don't think that it's appropriate for a lawyer to object to a question that's raised by the judges in an administrative panel. But I also make the argument that asking about individual portions of the definition was what the council did with respect to our witness, and probably is fair game.
I would agree. Mr. Sheets, could you answer that question from?
No, I do not. It's called the First Amendment. It's free speech. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
So I just want to reiterate that you don't think that those words are offensive to children.
It's called free speech, the
Thank you.
First Amendment.
I have no other questions.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Weiner.
Mr. Sheets, your street address, please.
I would object to that.
Did you hear what counsel just said? You can't object to my question. Try and pay attention to what's going on.
Again, this gentleman's insulting to the attorney.
Oh, I'm not through. Believe me, I'm not through.
Oh, he can keep insulting. You're showing yourself on the record.
Mr. Weiner,
It's all
let's
decorum.
calm down. Yes.
Mr. Sheets, I'm going to ask one last time, your street address.
Don't answer it. Privacy.
I have been informed.
Okay,
not
let
to
me
answer that.
rephrase the question. You do live in Punta Gorda?
I actually live one street out of Punta Gorda in Charlotte County.
Well, Counselor's comment on page 10 was by the fact that both parties to this case reside within Punta Gorda. So either your counselor's wrong or you're wrong. I mean, you don't know where you live, he doesn't know where you...
Just let me just interject one thing.
Well,
May I, please? I do not understand the issue as what was in the pleading and the person's address. From my point of view, if I may, in the discussion, the ordinance does not apply only or against people where they live. On its face, it's applicable to any individual. And so I do not see why the gentleman has to answer with what his address is. We're interested in his conduct, not his residence.
Okay, can you, in monetary fashion, that is to say, dollars and cents, how much corruption goes through the city clerk's office?
Objection, that's irrelevant, Mr. Chairman.
He brought it up.
Do I get to cross-examine, or is he going to keep interrupting me?
Noting the point previously made about inappropriate for counsel to object questions, but, what is the relevance of the?
Mr. Sheets just said he was thrown out of all city buildings and forced into the street because of the corruption in Punta Gorda. I want to know how many dollars are spent on corrupt services in Punta Gorda that he got thrown out on the street.
Okay, in that context.
Counsel, what do I answer?
You know, you don't know.
I do not know.
So you just say there's corruption in city clerk's office and the police department, in public works and everything else, and let it go at that?
Actually, 9 years of evidence on the Charlotte County Copwatch Facebook page. It's not a lie, it's real.
Wait a second, I'm sorry, but I live in Punta Gorda, and what's on Charlotte County's Facebook page doesn't affect me. You made statements that there is corruption in the city clerk's office, police department, and other agencies in the city. That's why you were thrown out on the street, because...
Mr. Weiner, can we focus on the ordinance itself? And this is it may be an interesting matter, but it's a superfluous matter for the board's purpose today. Are there any other questions for the respondent?
I have a question. As we've always said, the goal of this board is to provide us with a safer community that complies with all of the codes and the regulations. When we're here hearing matters such as dirty roofs or et cetera, our goal is to bring people into compliance. Could these, I understand you're looking to get a message across to the people and to educate the public to what you're trying, your points of view. Could that just as easily be accomplished without what we perceive to be indecent speech, such as stop policing for profit, or just removing the words that may be indecent to some? You don't find them indecent, but some people do. Could you not get your point across, and we could then return to just having a community where children can walk around and look at signs? Everybody could read your message then.
Just like radio and TV, you don't have to look and listen.
That's not true.
Just a suggestion, not a comment. I mean, that's our goal here as a
Well,
community board.
May I just, to your statement, you don't have to look and listen. It's a little difficult to look, and when somebody has a sign in front of your face, where a TV, you have the option to turn it off. You don't have it with you. My other question to you is there nothing that is not protected in your view? Any language, any place, anytime?
It's, once you lose free speech, you're not free.
Counsel, I mean, you're not here to determine the constitution of the ordinance. I think it's been more than established why he does his protest. His personal views, the extent of his belief in free speech really has nothing on your factual determination. I wish you had just, like Mr. Levin says, let's look at that definition, and let's look at each word of the definition.
I agree with you, thank you.
Yeah, my comment was just to have a win-win so our community can just coexist peacefully.
Are there any other questions for the respondent?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Weiner?
So if I understand what's going on, and I don't know whether you have one or not, and I'm projecting, but your 6-year-old grandson can walk around with "fuck grandpa" on his shirt, no problem. Your sit down.
Mr. Chairman.
I understand that we're getting to beyond.
Attorneys typically stand up in court as a
Yes.
show of respect to the chair. That's why I stand. I've never had a judge tell me to sit down when I stood up as a show of respect. So,
Mr. Weiner, we just temper your
yes.
conduct, please,
Yeah.
so we can get on.
What is it, how do you want me to rephrase that question, Mr.
This
Chair?
has nothing to do with the interpretation of the statute, application of the facts.
We're talking about free speech. Am I in a different room? We're talking about free speech.
In public.
We are getting a bit of field. It is, the issue is free speech, but it's speech in terms of what the ordinance is and what conduct Mr. Sheets had with it.
Again, for the sake of due process and with the deference of the hearing, let's try to tone down our emotions and,
If there's no further questions for the respondent,
I have a question for you, and then we're closing.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, can you ask Counselor, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for reminding me of that. Mr. Sheets, you'll have to come up, because I have a question for you.
Sorry.
My question is very simple, can be answered yes or no. The word you used on those placards, fuck you, in other words, in your mind or in your intent or in your interpretation, do they anyway depict or describe sexual or excretory activities or organs?
No, they did not.
Thank you. And I'll have some closing.
Well, before you do, I've got a cross-examination question, please. Sheets. Forgive my language, but it's necessary in this proceeding. What does the word "fuck" mean to you?
Actually, it's almost a meaningless word nowadays. It used to mean, bad things before, but it's so.
What kind of bad things?
I don't know.
Are you not aware that the word historically and even today refers to a sexual activity?
I did not use it as a sexual activity.
I'm not asking you that. I'm asking you the word itself. How is that word defined in the word itself? What is the definition of the word fuck?
Actually, it's funny you say that. It's called flicken. It's from German. It means to strike. And in fact, another definition is for unlawful carnal knowledge.
Steve, would
That
you
wasn't
answer the
my-
question, please?
Thank you.
Rather than lecturing on derivation.
Correct. What again is the question?
What does the word fuck mean?
It's just a strong word when you're making a strong statement.
And you have no appreciation that it describes a sexual activity?
No, nope.
Okay. What's the word cunt mean to you?
Another strong word which is used everywhere now, including tons of movies and TV shows. It's
Mr.
almost
Sheets,
meaningless.
What does it mean to you, not where it's used?
It's another, just a strong word when you're making a strong statement.
And you have no idea what the word defines.
It's just another strong word when you want to make a strong statement.
You've never heard that it refers to a sexual organ?
It's just another strong
No,
word.
that's
when
not
you're
my question, sir. Have you never heard that the word cunt refers to a sexual organ?
Maybe a long time ago.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Is that it?
That's it. No.
I'm gonna make a little closing here. I'll try to be brief, okay? The more attention you focus on what I'm saying, and less you want to pick on me for what I'm saying, the quicker this will go. And please pay attention. I would hope, and I do believe each one of you respect and honor the law. That's why you're here. You don't get to interpret the grandiose constitutional issues of the law, but you do get to determine what these words mean in common area, ordinary usage, and you get to apply them to this case. That's pretty high judicial function in a way. So I want to talk mainly about that, what these words mean and how you apply it, how you should apply it in this particular case. And also I want to briefly talk about community standards and what they mean, and something that really struck me as odd about the community standards argument. For one thing, if you look at this ordinance, it's if you had an area where 16-year-olds could not go and 16 and below, then this ordinance wouldn't apply. I don't think there's any public areas like that, but they put it in the ordinance. So if you had that, it wouldn't apply at all. So let's say we have a special event. We have to keep 16-year-olds out. You could hold up those signs all day long and there could be no violation. That's clear. Now, if you respect the law, you're going to say, yeah, well, he's right about that. So what does that mean? Who are these community standards about? That eliminates the whole community above 16. It's irrelevant because that community is not indecent to that community. So we're talking about the community standards of 16 and below. Please be told, what community standards do they have? They're on the internet all the time. They hear the F-bomb dropped all the time. What are their standards? You know, nobody has talked about what these community standards are, or tried to identify what this whole ordinance is about. It's about community standards below the age of 16. Yeah, well, we would like to keep our children from hearing those bad words or seeing them. They hear it all the time. It's on TV. The politicians banter about the F word. Guess what? If you go on Amazon, not Amazon, but Google, do a safe search and put in fuck Biden, guess what comes up? You can do it. Do it yourself. I did it. Put on safe search. It shows a page where Amazon is selling signs that says fuck Biden. Community standards, you go on the internet, you put in fuck you. What do you hear? I've got it here for you. I'm not gonna, it's a song using fuck you words. That's on safe search. Now, do we really want to implement, do we really want to sanitize our speech into the way we think is moral? If we can put it in the way we think are moral, somebody can come in and say, you can't use any gender words. He or she are out. You ever thought of that? If you can say this, somebody else can say that. And for long, you have to say what you have to say or you're in the poker. Respect the law. I'm old school. Council said, I didn't like to hear the words because I consider, they could be considered obscene. Hey, I remember the day when if somebody cussed, they would apologize to a woman. Oh, I'm sorry I said that, ma'am. Now the F word rolls off women's tongue like it's water. Where are the community standards here? We haven't shown any communities. We haven't even defined the relevant community. And I'm telling you, the relevant community is 16 and below, the way this is written. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Respect the law. And not only think about that, let's think about indecent speech, what that means. Bear me with a little folly, please. Let's read this. Indecent speech, depict or describe sexual activities. Now, if I say, oh, what the fuck? Does anybody here think I was trying to describe sexual activities? I don't think so. I think that would be off the chart to think if I say, what the fuck, I'm describing sexual activities. A fucking idiot, Does that conjure something? No. These are just terms. When you apply this law, some of you wanted to say, look, is it obscene? Guilty. No, that's not the issue. You got to read the whole thing. If you want to honor the law, if you love the law, you'll follow the law and you'll take every word into account. Not just the ones somebody wants you to take into account, but every word into account. They don't hold up FU signs for that reason. It's just a strong expletive. That's all it is. So let's think this through. Do the right thing. Apply each word. We'll know. Let the community know you're thinking about it. Discuss it. Don't just come to a rash decision. He's not guilty. Thank you.
Chairman, I'd like to make a final closing argument, please.
Yes.
So the city council adopted this ordinance, and they carefully considered the words that are in this ordinance. Their prior ordinance made it unlawful to have obscene words on a sign. Didn't define what obscene words were. And that ordinance was adopted many years ago. The genesis of this new ordinance was actually to be consistent with the provisions of a relatively recent U.S. Supreme Court decision in Reed versus City of Gilbert in Arizona.
Would this sign have been permissible under the old ordinance?
No, it would not. Excuse me, I take that back. Yes, it would, because we did not have a definition for indecent speech. So,
And we have one. And we have one now.
So the genesis of this ordinance
Excuse me,
was.
Mr. Levin, we're getting into constitutional
No,
interpretation.
I'm not interpreting, I'm not intending to interpret, and I didn't interrupt your closing argument. I appreciate the same courtesy. I'm explaining how this ordinance, contrary to what your client said in his statement, was not drafted to address him. It was actually drafted to address the U.S. Supreme Court's finding that ordinances which are content-based determinations of signs in different locations and different sizes based on the content was unconstitutional. So that was the genesis of this ordinance. And so when this ordinance was prepared, 99% of it addressed modifications of the existing sign code that under today's standards wouldn't meet the content neutral standard that the U.S. Supreme Court has set forth with respect to our signs. And so in order to address and correct the old definition that was in the ordinance of obscene to be consistent with what the U.S. Supreme Court has defined obscene to be, it was necessary to differentiate between different forms of speech that were determined by the courts not to be protected by the First Amendment. Indecent speech was one of those, and this definition was crafted from cases that have defined indecent speech. When determining the definition, just like the city council uses, and as other government bodies do, use the word reasonable. Reasonable is something that is what we understand it to be in the circumstance. You can't really have a good definition or an adequate definition for reasonable. It somewhat defines or defies the ability to define what it is, what is its standard. In this context, contemporary community standards is similar, in that those people that are the governing body, those people that live in the city, and those people that are selected to enforce the ordinance as police officers, and those people that are tasked with the enforcement of the ordinance on the Code Enforcement Board, understand what would be considered as offensive to our community. And that's the task that the city council placed on you without providing specific definition for community standards, because you know what is offensive and what is not offensive in our community. It may be less offensive elsewhere. And secondly, it's not the phrase that the city's ordinance prohibits. It's the use of the particular words. And it's the sign that contains indecent speech, which is legible from a public right-of-way or within public space, and can be potentially viewed by children under the age of 17, which makes the violation. If the sign was displayed, for example, at one of our local drinking establishments late at night, where it's not likely that there would be children under the age of 17, then the officers in the enforcement of their responsibilities would not make a violation of the sign code under those circumstances. But the evidence before you today was that this particular sign that's in this case was being displayed in front of a county building on public property that is probably within the city of Punta Gorda, one of the most frequented buildings in the city for county services. And many of the people that come in there to renew their driver's licenses and whatever other activities that they need to do in front of the county's administrative people are going to bring children under the age of 17. The officers know that because they're familiar with how that location is utilized. So the officer who was called to the scene made a determination based on the words, the individual words on the two signs that the respondent was carrying, was that was indecent speech that would be considered to be offensive, and in a location that was a public location and potentially could be viewed by children under the age of 17. So we have satisfied the elements of this particular ordinance and would ask for a finding of violation. I would also point out that this case is, and the citation method of citing the violator is the nature of this type of a case is an irreparable case, meaning it's like the toothpaste is out of the tube. You can't put the toothpaste back in. And under the statute 162, as well as our city ordinance, with respect to an irreparable violation, if you find there to be a violation and it was irreparable, under the statute in our ordinance, you can fine up to $5,000 per offense, and would ask that you consider it as an irreparable violation. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
We have a brief to respond.
No, I'm sorry. You had your chance. It's closing.
Generally,
Sorry.
as a sir, there's brought up some new issues. All I want to say is about the penalty. These men, you know,
Podium, please.
first of all, none of that was what you should be.
You want to talk about the penalty?
Yeah, I'll talk about the penalty.
That's what you, I thought what you
Well,
got.
that's true, and thank you for directing me that way. The penalty, the only thing that's going to stop this case is eventually, if you rule against them, is going to end up determining the constitutionality You know, all I can say is, look, honor the effort of protecting all of our constitutional rights, just not mine, but also yours, the rights of the people that don't, legislation that we can only speak gender-neutral words, people that want to live in a free society. Honor people that make that effort.
Well, you're talking about the penalty.
I am.
Are you going back over the speech again?
Not really. I do want to point out something. You know, I'm seeing a distinct bias here. I mean, I get picked on a lot. So did my witness. Theirs didn't. I'm seeing a bias here. And I think you got to, you know, say, hey, why don't we just do our job here and rule according to the law? Let's pick out each word. Let's don't be biased. So, Sheets, Massey, they're out there for all of us, really. They don't want this to be Orwellian society, especially if it goes against the grain. So why penalize them so much? Put a small penalty on there if you have to put a penalty, and let's get this thing to a different court and see what happens.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Any discussion amongst the board on this?
You know, I understand him wanting to protest. I just don't, I really can't understand you wanting to use those words. You don't represent me, because I wouldn't get out, if I want to protest, I'm not going to get out there and use inflammatory, what I feel is language. And it'd be a sad day in this country when a newborn just getting up, starting to walk, and his first words out of his mouth is F you. It'd be a sad day in this country, okay? No matter which way it goes. So, I mean, that's my piece.
Any other comments?
Well, I look at it in two ways. The F word, as used in the signs at question, was used as a verb, not as an adverb, not as an adjective. It was used as a verb. The C word was used as a noun, not as an expletive, as a noun. So when you take those two things into consideration in context, they are explicitly indecent, in my opinion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Wiener?
if you're ready for a motion.
Mr. Wiener?
Not yet.
Mr. Wiener, and I might suggest that you or I not make the motion, please.
Why is that?
Well, because I think you and I maybe have been argumentative, and personally, I'd rather not make the motion, just.
Well,
I'd like to make a
if
co-
you
I'd
don't
like
want to make
a
the motion,
comment.
that's fine, but I'd like to make the motion.
I've got a
Well, we have
comment.
We're not done yet making comments. So, Mr. Nettleson?
The city has tried to draw a very fine line between indecent speech and obscene speech. And it's my opinion, all right, and I'm not stating this for consideration by others, is that this case will probably, this ordinance as written would probably be found unconstitutional. That's not the question that's not what I'm stating, what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how much of our city's treasure do we want to spend defending this? Because it's going to go to the circuit court, it's going to go to the district court, it might go to the Florida Supreme Court. I mean, how much do we want to, I mean, how much do we really, how strongly do we feel about this? And can't we find a better way?
Anybody else? Well, maybe my views. One, I know Mr. Nelson's very concerned about community standards, but from all of my reading, and as I understand it, not being it, community standards represent this board. We are the community for Punta Gorda. And so it's not anything else, it's what offends us. And that's the way we should treat it. And I have a problem with the use of the word the way it was described by Mr. Sheets. It does offend me, I will tell you that right now. And I also found it very incredible and somewhat evasive, self-serving, and unbelievable that he did not know what the words fuck and cunt mean. I just cannot believe you stood up and said that you did not know. It really questioned, my view on your credibility. But the conduct was on public property. It was a sign, and I think, from my view, that I would support a motion that the respondent has violated the ordinance.
May I make that motion, Mr. Chair?
You may make, if you want to make that motion, that's fine.
I can make the
Motion to find that the citation is valid and the respondent did irreparably violate Chapter 9A, Section 9A through 9A hyphen 13C8 and Chapter 26, Section 11.5Z of the Punta Gorda Code in order that the fine in the amount of $5,000 be imposed plus case costs incurred in the amount of $7.41 in order that said fine be, and case costs be paid within 10 days.
Is there a second to that motion?
amendment, please. I would like to amend that motion, please.
There's no second, you can't amend it.
Oh,
No motion, no second to the motion, and the motion falls. Anybody else want to make another motion?
I'd like to make a motion to find that the citation is valid and the respondent did irreparably violate Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13C8 and Chapter 26, Section 11.5Z of the Punta Gorda Code in order that a fine in the amount of $1,000 be imposed plus case costs incurred in the amount of $7.41 in order that said fine and case costs be paid within 10 days of the entry of the order.
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been made and second to find that the citation is valid and the respondent has irreparably violated the said chapters. Any discussion on the motion? Vote on the motion. All those in favor as the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
So what do we have?
4 to
I guess we have,
3.
Nay.
take a roll. Jay, Nora,
Nay.
and Mr. Weiner?
Yes. Nay.
3 nays, 4 ayes. Motion carries. Next case.
Would a short break be in order?
Yes,
Thank you.
I think so. The citation 205076, case number 21-79930, police officer Taylor Smith, respondent Richard Lee Massey. Is the respondent present?
Yes, sir.
How do you plead, Mr. Massey?
Not guilty.
Not guilty, thank you. Would the city please present its case?
Yes, I don't know if you identified the violations.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't read it. I'm so, it's been so repetitious, but I will. Violation of Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13C8, and violation of Chapter 26, Section 11.5Z, display of indecent signs.
And the address of the violation was
Is 326 West Marion Avenue.
Thank you. Good morning. It's still morning. Would you please state your name for the record?
Officer Taylor Smith,
And by whom are you employed?
Punta Gorda Police Department,
What is your position with the Punta Gorda Police Department?
Road Patrol Officer,
And what are your duties and responsibilities?
enforcing local and state laws, proactive patrol, and responding for calls of service mainly.
And were you so employed as a police officer on June 14th, 2021?
I was.
On that date, did you receive a request to respond to a potential code violation at 326 West Marion Avenue?
I did.
And is 326 West Marion Avenue within the territorial limits of the city of Punta Gorda?
It is.
And did you in fact respond to said request?
I did.
All right. Are you generally familiar with the city's sign standards contained in Chapter 26 Punta Gorda Code?
I am.
On the screen, I show you city's Exhibit Number 1. Do you recognize Exhibit Number 1 as the definition of the term sign is contained in the city's sign code?
I do.
I'd like to show you the city's Exhibit Number 2. And do you recognize this exhibit as the definition of the term indecent speech as contained in the city's sign code?
I do.
Now I'd like to show you exhibit number 3. Do you recognize exhibit number 3 as one of the types of signs prohibited by the city sign code?
I do.
I'd like to now show you city's exhibit number 4. Does this photo appear to be taken from your body camera?
It does.
And does the photograph appear to be an accurate depiction of the scene upon your arrival at 326 West Marion Avenue on June 14th, 2021?
It does.
And what building is located at 326 West Marion Avenue?
Punta Gorda City Hall.
Who is the person that's sitting on the bench in city's exhibit number 4?
Richard Lee Massey.
How do you know, and how did you ascertain Mr. Massey's identity?
Upon arrival, when I got on scene there, Mr. Massey had stated that he was not going to give me his identification or means of identifying him unless there was a threat that he would be placed under arrest. I explained to Mr. Massey that at that point he was not under arrest, and I asked him if we had had any prior interactions with him. He said, probably with Lieutenant Lipker, who is one of our lieutenants on the Punta Gorda Police Department. From there, actually, it's kind of interesting. So based off of what Massey had said to me, that gave me enough to say, okay, we may have had interaction with Mr. Massey at some point, and an intern was actually with me as well. And he had mentioned that within the last week, he believed that Mr. Massey, who I was with on this date, was in fact the same person that Lieutenant Lipker had dealt with approximately 1 week prior. From there, you go back to the patrol car, you look up the past incidents within this past week in regards to a code violation. From there, I was able to determine that Lieutenant Lipker had issued Mr. Massey 1 week prior a warning for the indecent sign. That's how I was able to obtain his identity. What I did was I ran the driver's license based off of what Lieutenant Lipker had already ascertained in his investigation from a week prior. As you can tell from the photograph up there, I had actually pulled up Mr. Massey's photograph from the driver's license after I had run him, and I could automatically identify him as the person that I was speaking to in person during my incident. So that's how I was able to identify him.
Thank you. So city's exhibit number 5, that was that taken during your determination of Mr. Massey's identification?
Yes.
Let me refer you back to exhibit 4. And what was Mr. Massey sitting in a public space?
Yes.
And what was Mr. Massey holding in his hands?
I'm just referring to my report. It's "Fuck Punta Gorda, trying to illegally kill free speech."
Okay. And was that, did that sign contain any indecent speech, as that term is defined by the city's sign standards?
Yes.
And specifically, what word or words on Mr. Massey's sign did you find to be indecent speech, as that term is defined in the city's sign code?
Fuck. And just to kind of go back a little bit, he also was parked in the parallel parking. I think I also notated that in my report as well. His vehicle was flying the "Fuck Biden" flag as well. So we have the "Fuck Biden" flag that's parked pretty much right in front of the city hall in the parallel parking, and then also the sign.
All right, I'm going to ask, we're going to confine ourselves to the sign that's depicted here, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And what was the approximate time of day of your observations of Mr. Massey?
I responded at approximately 2:29 p.m.
And was Mr. Massey holding a sign in an area where his sign could potentially be viewed by children under the age of 17?
Yes.
And I think you mentioned, you ascertained that Mr. Massey had previously received a written warning from the city for an alleged violation of Chapter 26, Section 11.5Z Punta Gorda Code, is that correct?
Correct.
And I think you said Mr. Massey was issued a written warning on June 7th, 2021 for displaying a sign with indecent speech at that same location?
Correct.
Yep. Okay, what is going on here on City's Exhibit Number 6?
So at this point, I've identified Massey. I've typed up the violation, the ticket, the $100 fine, and I was, from what I believe, just based off of this, trying to explain to Mr. Massey the citation process, how he could pay for it if he wishes, or contest the citation.
And does this, the enlargement of this photo better show the word that you found to be in violation of the city's code?
Yeah, I can see it from here. I mean, that's just me.
And I show you Exhibit Number 7 and ask if you can identify this exhibit.
Yes, that is,
Is that a true and accurate copy of the citation you provided to Mr. Massey on June 14th, 2021?
yes.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, I would enter Exhibits 1 through 7 into the record.
Accepted.
I have no further questions and offer Officer Smith for cross-examination.
Officer, did you have any conversations with Mr. Massey?
Upon arrival, yes, I did.
Did he express to yourself that he was there trying to defend First Amendment rights?
Along those lines, yes.
Okay, he wasn't yelling at people?
Not initially, no. He was screaming at me by the end of it, but no, not directly toward
Talking about other people?
anybody, no.
No, no. He was pretty polite, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Just to illustrate a point that I want to make here, if that sign had said, "What the fuck," didn't say any, and that was the words, would that have been a violation?
Repeat your question, I'm sorry.
The sign said, "What the fuck," would that be a violation?
Yes,
Fuck off?
Yes.
Violation?
yes.
Okay. Just like the other case, I think you set through here, you're going mainly by the memo. You're not trying to make a determination as to whether those words depict or describe sexual or excretory activities or organs,
I would
correct?
object to the form of the question. She did not testify that she relied on any memo in making the determination that the sign and the word on the sign was a violation of the ordinance.
I'm just trying to cut through it. Did you rely on the memo, or did you make an independent decision of what was the words that couldn't be used?
Based off of what the code ordinance has stated and the memo, we were going off of, I had made the determination that that sign was in violation of the code ordinance.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Just a follow-up question, if I might. What building is depicted in behind Mr. Massey in that photo, in photo number 6?
The city hall.
And what office is immediately inside the doors of the city hall?
I mean, there's multiple offices. in that.
Is the city clerk's office one of the offices that are just inside the front door?
Yes,
And have you had occasion to see members of the public come and go into the city clerk's office?
yes,
And is that a public space?
yes,
And is that a space where children under the age of 17 can potentially be found?
yes, and I can actually kind of go into further as far as how I made that determination, considering that was a big discrepancy on the last one, but it's up to you.
Go ahead.
Right around the corner is actually Gilchrist Park. It's about a block away. And we see juvenile children, we see children under the age of 17, we see adults there. It's a very popular place. It's located right near historic district and the downtown area. So it's pretty centrally located
All right, was
in
it-
regards to that question.
And was it your determination that where Mr. Massey was, as shown on City's Exhibit 6, that he was in a location that was potentially within eyesight of children under the age of 17?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
You're considered, this, if this sign was downtown on the streets of Punta Gorda, on the side, in these type of public forums, would there be similarly a determination that 16-year-old could see it?
In downtown?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if someone is downtown making a speech, trying to get across their First Amendment rights and use the F word making the speech, are you going to violate them for that?
I would object to the question because this is not a violation of any public speech. It is a violation of a sign code, and the words of concern are on a sign, not a public speech.
Okay, I'll withdraw that question. Thank you. That's it.
Does the board have any
Yes.
questions of the officer?
I have a question for the officer. Officer, was this sign where if a 5-year-old with their parent were to walk by, would they be able to see the sign?
Well, if you kind of look in the direction of the body camera, it is close to the sidewalk. So that's really all I can attest to. I mean,
Were you offended by the word?
that's not my call, sir, to be respectfully. That's not my call.
Okay, thank you. Do you think the community as a whole or as a standard would be offended by the word?
In regards to that, sir, just to throw this out there, this was not a proactive measure. This was actually a complaint-driven call. This was a complaint that came in from a community member who had seen the sign and deemed it offensive based off of what they had seen.
Okay, thank you. One other question. You were talking about Mr. Massey's attitude when you first arrived. He was cordial or compliant with you, but then you stated as you issued him the citation, what was his demeanor?
I'll go into a little bit of depth. When I first got on scene, he was cordial toward me. The only compliance issue was obviously the fact that he did not want to give me a form of identification or his identity. He asked me multiple times if he was under arrest. If that were the case, he would give me his identity. We went back and forth for a little bit. No sort of arguing or anything like that. It wasn't until after I had come back up from my car and issued the citation where he began to raise his voice. He became agitated with the incident. I gave him the ticket. I said, hey, you have 10 business days to pay this. He said, I'm not going to pay this. I'm going to wipe my ass with it. So obviously that shows kind of his agitated state. We were trying to walk away. He kept screaming at me. One of the other officers was there present as well and witnessed it and continued to do so until we ended up fully departing because of the way he was yelling. While I was in my car, I wasn't engaging with him. He was continuing to follow me to my car and then yelling at me from the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I have one question. The address on the violation of Shoemaker Road in Sebring, Florida, was that ascertained from the official motor vehicle records when you pulled his license as his official address?
Yes, I believe, is it in Arcadia?
It says Sebring, Florida.
Sebring, yeah, I'm not positive. I have to go back. Usually with that, it automatically populates based off of the addresses that we have on file.
Thank you.
I have a question. So when you looked at the ordinance, section Z, which you cited him, so did you find the language on the sign obscene?
Again,
So-
again, objection, well, I can't.
That's a question.
You're right, but You're right.
So
did you
what
find it
you're
obscene?
asking me, in my opinion, did I find it obscene? Because I'm not attesting to my opinion. I'm attesting to the facts of what we have in front of us, the memorandums we have been issued, and whether or not that sign violated the code ordinance. My opinion, I do not attest to my opinion or anything having to do with that.
Well,
Because you're asking me, do I find,
well, I'm asking you to say whether, if he had had a different sign, where instead of having the word,
well, that's hypothetical.
And with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, we're talking about obscene, we're talking about different sign. That's not the issue before the court, before the board today.
well, it says, the statute says obscene or indecent, so I'm trying to determine whether or
And
not
the
there was
citation
a...
that was issued as reflected on city's exhibit 7 and in your packet was indecent sign.
Would a sign with a raised middle finger saying that and either Trump or Bush or whoever,
Let's
would
not
that
get
be,
into
would that be indecent as well?
That's not the case.
Testifying for the,
If you're asking me something directly related to my case, I'd be more than happy to help
May I
you.
just say, we're getting into hypotheticals, which is not really the matter before.
Well, I'm
us.
trying to establish what the community standard is, all right, because
I think
because the
we already
sign,
know it.
because it says language or graphics, and
But
it's...
in this case, it's language.
In this case, it's language, but we're trying to establish what the community standards are, because if we can't establish community standards,
Well, like I
we
said,
can't enforce this.
sir, I'm sorry, I don't know your last name.
Nadelson.
Nielsen. One of the reasons we responded was because of the fact that it is a complaint-driven call. Now, that is us responding to investigate what this person, who the complainant was, what they found to be offensive to them, who is a part of our community.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if there's no other questions or comments?
I just was asked, does anybody else have anything further for the officer?
I get to follow up.
Mr., I'm sorry.
I get
Why
to
are you
fo-
up?
Well, I get to follow up. Who complained?
Is that relevant?
Am I good to, I
I'm
mean,
sorry.
I can.
Why is that relevant, that you would know the person's name?
I didn't mention a name. I said who
You're asking
complained.
who filed the complaint. I thought you wanted the person's identity.
So one of,
Well,
if you don't,
It's just asking.
If
It
I
was
can-
important to the officer that it somehow reflected the community standards. Therefore, we want to know who actually it was that put in the complaint.
I was asking, you want the person's identity?
Basically, yes.
I can kind of go into detail how we
Well, yeah, I want the
ascertained.
person's
I mean,
identity. I thought
Mr.
you were
Jackson,
saying that
Mr.
was
Jackson,
wrong.
can you talk to us about
I'm not at liberty
code
to disclose
compliance?
that.
Hold on.
And-
There's a state statute
State
that went
statute.
into effect July 1st that prohibits the receipt of complaints in an anonymous fashion, okay? So we have a record of who it was that initiated the complaint. However, that complaint was initiated before July 1st. And therefore, we have the ability, since it's not really relevant other than the fact that that was the reason why the officer came to the scene, as to who the complaining party was. In the future, it would be necessary for us to reveal, as part of the record, who the complaining party was. But before July 1st, that person did have the right for protection of their privacy.
If it's, it's irrelevant who complained, that whole line of testimony about that relevant to the community's standards should be out, should have no bearing.
If you do not know who the person was that filed the complaint, that makes the complaint irrelevant? Is that your argument?
No, the officer was trying to say, there was a question about community standards. He said, well, I'll go further than that, and I'll tell you this was a called-in complaint. She was using the fact that it was called in to explain to you that the community standard was in play on this because it was a called-in complaint.
I don't believe that. She responded to a complaint after they came to the site. That was when a determination if the conduct, I believe that's what she testified to. I'm not trying to. but it
Yeah,
wasn't.
she said it was called in, therefore it must have been an issue of community standard.
He didn't say.
Mr. Chairman, I asked her whether or not she found it obscene, and she responded that it was.
She found
call-
it, but he's
She
raising
didn't
the
say,
issue
she
of,
just said that it was called in.
complaining. I find whether the complainant called in for whatever reason they called in and caused the officer to take action. I think we can move, I don't find that to be relevant, so move on, please.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, I don't have the authority to ask Mr. Nadelson to do anything, but perhaps the chairman you would. Please ask him to refrain from referring to whether the word was obscene in this proceeding, because that only muddles the record. We are not making an allegation that what language on the sign was obscene. The respondent is here on an indecent sign, and I think the record needs to remain clear on that.
I would like to say that I was not trying to muddle the record, I was trying to clarify the record. The city is hanging its hat on indecent, not on obscene.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Are you finished? I mean, is there anything?
I thought somebody up here was saying something, I
But-
don't want to interrupt. One last question from me. Do you recall what Mr. Massey was yelling? What specifically he was yelling, the word? The phrase he was yelling?
No, I'd have to look at the body camera foot. I don't recall verbatim.
Okay, well, we'll ask him. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Weiner, you have a,
I was going to make a motion that the city's found
okay.
a prima facie case.
We have any other questions of the officer from the board? No further questions, so I will entertain a motion as to whether or not the city has established a prima facie case.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the city has proven it has a prima facie case.
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded that a prima facie case has been established.
What am I, chopped liver?
No, I just leave it to him. Any discussion on that?
Yes. In my view, and I'm doing this not to repeat myself, but because this is a different defendant, a different plaintiff in this case, that I don't think the city has established any community standards for determining what is indecent. And for that reason, and they have an obligation to do that. And for that reason, I would think that there is not a prima facie case.
Motions, I'm sorry.
Call the question.
I will, thank you. Any other comments? None, all right. Motion has been made that the prima facie case has been established. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed,
Nay.
motion passes with one negative vote. Mr. Heindel, you,
Thank you, Board, for having me. My name's Richard Massey, for the record.
and you've been sworn.
Yes, I have, sir. I'm here to read my statement. I was raised by a strong military man. They never held back on the words they used. Yes, some words were harsh. They served they served this country to give me and everyone in this room to say, the right in this room to say and display what we want to say. The fundamental right protected by the First Amendment. My sign and protest was against the city's attempt to restrict the rights was right down to politicality of speech. You cannot have a limit on political speech. You may not approve of my method of speech, but it's still protected under the First Amendment. I know the case law that covers the subject, and I will leave it to my counsel to argue the law. I am here to protect my kids' right and everyone's in this room's right. If we make free speech illegal, where does it stop? I want my kids to have the right to express themselves in any way they want, like I did as a kid. If one of my sons feel like they need to protest with words some consider bad or offensive, I would proudly stand beside him. No questions asked. It's our right to express ourselves through speech of any type with minor limitations. I was told by the city police officer that you may have the right to say so-called bad words. which I can tell you the officer's name if y'all want to know his name. He's on record saying it. You just cannot have it on a sign or a shirt. What's the difference between saying it in front of kids where they definitely can hear it versus having it on a sign where there's a chance they will not read it? Free speech does not have a limitation on whether it's on paper or in speech. It's all covered by the First Amendment. That is why my father and my grandfather served this country to defend. Give me 1 second here, I'm changing pages, sorry. The rights, to defend our rights. The city officer who took an oath to defend the Constitution, the state Constitution, then the city bylaws. So Miss Smith, sorry, taking to me, she violated her oath to the Constitution of the United States of America and the Florida Constitution. I would only hope this panel would do the right thing and dismiss my ticket. My lawyer will argue all relevant case law on this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions?
Mr. Massey,
Yeah, go ahead. I do have cross-examination, but,
I'm so rare, but
and you have, and his attorney may have some additional questions as part of his case. But certainly you can ask questions. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
thank you. Mr. Massey, do you think
Not
that,
through presenting yet, sir.
Yeah, I think it'd be better if we let him ask his questions, and then counsel can cross-examine, and then board ask questions. That's kind of the procedure set up.
Mr. Massey, you heard the officer's testimony about you yelling. What were you yelling?
I was yelling for her to honor her oath to the United States Constitution. That's exactly what I was yelling.
Why is that important to you?
Because my granddaddy, as well as my father and my two stepdads, served inside the United States services. I tried joining, but because of birth defects, I was not allowed to. Otherwise, I would be in 20 years, just like most of my family was, sir.
The words you used on your sign, which says indecent speech, did you use language or graphics that depict or describe sexual or excretory activities or organs in your signs, in your opinion?
No, sir.
Do you have any intent to depict or describe sexual or excretory activities or organs in your protests?
No, sir.
And the words that you use, what to you, no matter what do they mean to you? How do you use them to express yourself?
Well, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail. Since I was about 3 years old, I heard them words growing up by the gentlemen around me. They have multiple meanings inside the U.S. language at the moment. And my use of the F word was just a use of it to pound in the this city trying to kill the free speech of us, sir. So it was just to make it punch in, go home a little bit more.
Are you really frustrated with when people try to undo your free speech rights?
Yes, I am. That's why I drove three counties away to come down and protest, because it starts here and spreads to all the different communities around.
What kind of words do you use to express your frustration?
I use the word fuck, is the exact word I use.
You hear other people using that to express frustration, anger?
Oh, yeah. It's the perfect example. Our Congress people tweet it out all the time. The BLM has a right to walk to walk through streets holding up signs and yell it, and there's nothing done to them. But here I'm coming down personally, one-on-one protesting, and I was fined. When there's been several protests inside the city with multiple people, and none of these officers sit in this room, fined them or nothing. They sat there and watched them and then just allowed them to do it. What's that? Sorry.
You're not vaccinated with the mask?
I am vaccinated, but I have a weak immune system, sir, so that's why I wear it.
Thank you.
I just got out of the hospital, so I do apologize. I'm not a junkie, but I know my arm's all bruised up from all the IV antibiotics I've been on.
So,
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I kind of reached my level of confusion about 3 hours ago. So the sign that,
excuse me, sir, I'm in the middle of questioning this gentleman.
Yeah, please, board, let him finish. Let's stick to the
Mr.
procedure.
Don't become repetitive. I think you've made your point on, please.
Sometimes I think so, but it doesn't seem to be reflected in the vote.
I'm talking about Mr. Massey and his testimony.
Thank you. Sir, you said you had seen other people holding signs with those colorful metaphors, which Bach would call them,
In Punta Gorda?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. I got video of it, sir.
and you didn't see anybody getting cited for that?
Nope. For matter of fact, there was a protest here, week after I was ticketed, right here at City Hall. And I imagine some of these officers can testify to it. There was at least 10 officers I counted here. Gorman was one of them, Liquor was one of them here, and guys had signs saying fuck on it. Guy had a fishing pole with fuck hanging off it, walking around with it, and none of these officers did ticketed, and none of them. So, of course, I'm sitting here alone, and I have a ticket for it. Why is that? That's what I want to know. You had multiple people here. People came inside the City Hall meeting, and they had to close down the meeting because guys are in here yelling at them, fuck and everything else, holding the signs. The board meeting shut down because of it, which it's on video. Shut down because of it. And the officers came in, just told them, please leave. There was no tickets issued. There was no warnings issued in none of these cases. Me and Mr. Sheets are the only ones that ever have tickets issued. There's a total of eight different warnings for me and Mr. Sheets, I believe, to this day, when there's been at least 100 people out here in the city protesting every weekend, every Friday, as well as people coming right here to City Hall where I was doing it, and no one got a ticket but me.
Thank you. I think that's your point.
Okay, are you disabled, sir?
Yes, sir.
Are you able to pay big fines?
No, sir. I'm on a very strict limited income, sir.
Do you feel like that if you have to be fined a lot, that's just another slap in the face to your attempt to maintain your civil rights?
Yes, sir.
Is it okay if I ask this code board not to slap you in the face with a big fine?
That's fine with me, sir.
Thank you.
I have a
Mr. Levitt?
recross. This is the sign, on Exhibit 7, City Exhibit 6. The sign uses the word fuck.
Yes, sir.
Is it your understanding that that word does not have any relation to sexual activity?
And one of the definitions, yes, it does. But like I said, that word has many different definitions that English language right now. It's used in song lyrics. It's used by the President of the United States, congressmen, senators, the whole 9 yards. BLM, people protesting, and none of them mean that they want to fuck somebody.
Understood.
Sir.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Massey, I can understand, because I was in the hospital not long ago, and some of them nurses trying to get blood, they just tear you up, so I feel for you there.
I spent
Let me ask you
20 days in the
Let me ask
hospital.
you a few questions. Were you issued a warning prior to this?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Now, you had said that you had noted, and you have camera footage of other people that were holding signs or yelling or the profanities or whatever. Do you know if they ever received a warning?
They have not. I got it right off the body cameras of the officers on scene. And me and Sheets, I think there was a total of 8 of us who has received warnings, but all the people who came to City Hall, I know for a fact, did not get any kind of warnings that day.
Okay, and then the other question I have for you is, do you think that the F word would be offensive to some people in the community?
The way I was raised by the strong men around me, I would honestly say no, because my father used it since I was 3 years old.
And I understand, I can appreciate that, but do you think there would be some people in the community that would be offended
I
by
would,
that?
I would guess maybe so. But on the same hand, it's the First Amendment protected word. Colon v. California. I know y'all don't want to hear constitutional law here, but Colon v. California covers that explicit word alone.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Any other questions to the response? from the-
I do for Mr. Sheets. So,
Massey, sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Massey. So you state that you have video showing that other people
sir.
are carrying signs.
Yes, sir.
After the date that this ordinance was enacted.
Yes, sir. Many videos.
Are you arguing that you're being selectively prosecuted?
I am.
Have you provided this information for your attorney to present?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I don't know if he has it exactly, but I have other attorneys that's represented me as well.
He's not supposed to talk about anything between us, that's attorney-client privilege, just so you know.
I was just trying to, because he's talked about these other signs, I was trying to establish whether or not there's a claim of selective prosecution being made by either him or by you.
We'll try to address that.
I have no more questions.
Any other questions for the respondent?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Weiner.
Mr. Massey, so you made a statement that black folks were marching down the street with signs.
Yes, sir.
And to the best of my knowledge, when I viewed that parade and those signs said Black Lives Matter.
Maybe not, maybe not. So this town, sir, but across the country, they have.
Well,
used it.
you know what? I can't be responsible for what happens in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I'm just telling you that when those people marched down the street, the sign said Black Lives Matter. What I'm asking you is the sign that says Black Lives Matter the same as fuck Punta Gorda?
I'm gonna say inside the contents of that one sign, no. But that's like I said, the BLM commonly use fuck signs all the way across the nation. Might not have happened here inside this town, but across the nation it has happened.
But, please, we're concerned about Punta Gorda.
But,
What
sir,
what happens
this
someplace
is-
else is irrelevant to this.
Actually, it is not, sir.
Yes, it
Because
is.
it sets community standards across the nation, sir.
Well, community standards are a community here, and the ordinance is here within the city bounds. And so that's what we have to confine our attention to. Any other questions? Okay. With that,
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion if you'd like.
sure.
We get a chance to sum up here.
Would you like to? I would,
Want to do a closing argument in these cases,
yes,
or adopt something from the prior?
that would be fine.
Do you have any rebuttal?
Does Mr. Levin have anything further?
I have nothing further to say other than just a reminder again that this, we consider this to be a irreparable violation, so that the up to $5,000 per day fine would be applicable.
The point I want to make again is the words in this ordinance matter. It doesn't really matter why they put them in there. I mean, as an adjudicative body like you are, Mr. Levin seemed to want to go through the history. They put it in there for this reason, this case, this case, this case. I don't know why he said that. And then again, he doesn't want you to rule on the constitutionality. The word, it doesn't matter why they're there. They're there. If I had to tell you why they were there, they're kind of pulled from the obscenity standard, really, that's in that paper that we sent. But the fact that they're there, it doesn't matter why they're there. That's the way our law system is. If we don't go by the words in the statutes, in the ordinance, the actual words, what do we have? Do we have a rule by law? No, we don't. We have a rule by mob. So you got to go by the words and apply the words. It kind of saddened to me that none of you have discussed my point whatsoever, whether any of these words as used, there's not been a single bit of discussion whether any of the words as used depict or describe sexual excretory activities or organs. It's the use of the word, not the word itself, that this definition addresses. If it was just a word, it could have said, hey, you can't use the F word. You can't use the S word. No, it didn't say that. It said it leaves a decision to each case. I hadn't heard any discussion on it. Use words like, what the fuck? Of course that's not alluding to sex. And it has become a dirty little expression. I'll say it's dirty little. I don't use it. But whether it's dirty little, that's not what you're deciding on. You're deciding the words of this statute. You're deciding whether that dirty little expression that may have had its origin somewhere in a sexual activity, that's not what it means. It doesn't depict, it doesn't describe it. It's a dirty little expression. That's all it is. It's not words that describe or depict sexual activity. Dirty little expression. Ordinance doesn't overrule, outlaw dirty little expressions. Fuck you is a dirty little expression. Don't like it, but we can't get it out of our body.
Let's
Not
stay
one
with
of
a
you.
sign.
Excuse me?
We're talking about a sign, not speech.
We're talking about the words on the sign. That's speech. What else is it?
You keep talking about oral, that's all. Oral use of the word, not signage, that's all. I'm just.
Words are words, whether you put them in writing or whether you speak them. They have the same import and meaning. So I don't get the point there. Now, if you're saying, well, if you're alluding to the fact, well, viscerally, signs make it worse on the community, well, you may be right. You may be right. But, to be a civilized society, to be a law and order society, a rule of law society, we have to go by the words. I've had not one person discuss those words and whether these dirty little phrases fit that definition. Not one. It seemed like you don't even care. So why are you here if you don't care to apply the law like it's written? Why are you here? What good are you doing to this society if you don't care to apply the law like written? So rethink this, please. Sheets cares. Massey cares. They care about First Amendment rights. Let's don't throw big penalties at them. Let's wait and see how this thing works too.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, final argument. Here's the language as written in the ordinance. It doesn't talk about the phrase in which the word appears. It talks about what is the language, whether or not the word that's used on the sign describes sexual activity in a manner that is offensive as measured by contemporary community standards. And the prohibition is directed to signs that can be viewed by children under the age of 17. The word fuck, as used in the sign, is a word that describes sexual activities and is a manner which is offensive to those people in our community. And not just, the case isn't made because it may offend adults. The case is made because it would be potentially viewed by children under the age of 17. Now, maybe the older the child is, the more they might be able to appreciate the context of the word. But nevertheless, there are children under the age of 17 that see the word, and that word is what we're trying, and it's those particular words that are considered to be indecent speech as defined by our city council. It would be impossible for us to list every word that may be a description of a sexual activity which may be offensive. So the ordinance defines the speech. It's up to us to determine whether or not that word, and specifically you, to decide whether or not that word, not the phrase, but the word itself, describes a sexual activity in a manner that is offensive. And we submit just as the witnesses indicated, that the word fuck does have a sexual connotation associated with it. And hopefully you'll find that that word is offensive, is measured by our community standards, and therefore constitutes indecent speech. Because there's no dispute that he didn't use that word on a sign in a public space that was viewable, potentially viewable by children under the age of 17.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Levin, can you put up subsection Z? Because, you know, we're just focusing on one part of it, and this was part of the violation.
Yes.
Any sign which contains obscene language or graphics, and any sign containing fighting words. You could take some of that, and some people could get pretty upset at where I could see they'd probably want to create a fight, or indecent speech. So here we are, you know, put all that other stuff aside, and we still might have indecent speech, which is legible from any public right-of-way within a public space, which can potentially be viewed by children under the age of 17. And I agree with you 100% that as a child, and we consider anyone under 17 still a child, but I consider children even younger because they haven't been influenced by the external things that we have been influenced by. So I'd like to, the attorney, the defense attorney basically said, well, focus on this, you know, whether that word is a sexual word. But in this section of our code, it doesn't have anything to do with that, whether it's what we consider obscene language, containing fighting words, indecent speech.
And just to be clear, so that due process was provided in this case, the citation was specifically identifying an indecent sign. We didn't make the allegation that it was obscene. We didn't make the allegation it was in fighting words. It was an indecent sign, and that was the testimony that was presented before you. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board members on this? If not, then I will entertain a motion to...
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Weiner.
I'll give you a motion.
Go, Mr. Weiner.
Motion to find that the citation is valid and the respondent did irreparably violate Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13, paren C 8, and Chapter 26, Section 11.5, paren Z of the Punta Gorda Code, and order that the fine in the amount of $5,000 be imposed, plus case costs incurred in the amount of $7.41, and further order that said fine and case costs be paid within 10 days of the entry of this order.
Motion has been made that the respondent is in violation of the citation and should pay a fine of $5,000. Is there a second to that motion? Is there a second to that motion? The motion is not carried. I will entertain another motion.
I'll make a motion, please.
Please.
Motion to, excuse me, to find that the citation is valid and the respondent did irreparably violate Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13C8, and Chapter 26, Section 11.5Z of the Punta Gorda Code, and it is ordered that a fine in the amount of $500 be imposed, plus case costs incurred in the amount of $7.41, and further ordered that said fine and case costs be paid within 10 days of the entry of this order.
I second the motion.
And it's been seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Yes.
We're hanging our hat here on whether or not this was indecent. I think everybody knows that it's not obscene. And that's been adjudicated, but that we're hanging our hat on whether or not this is indecent or not. I'm just going to, something that Justice Harlan said in another case, said that this particular four-letter word, the same four-letter word, is perhaps more distasteful than others of its genre, and I agree, it is a distasteful word, but it's often true that one's man's vulgarity is another man's lyric. And this is political speech. I mean, he could have, I mean, if they had a sign that said Biden sucks, you know? Or I want to give Biden the finger, or, you know, is this all, you know, is this indecent? It's political speech. And I don't think the city has made their prima facie case that this is, that there's a community standard that's been violated here. We have to talk back, we have to go back to community standard. And there is no community standard, so we can't find him guilty.
Any other discussion on the motion? No. I will tell you that I still believe, from my view, that this board constitutes community standards, not, just like anything else. What is a reasonable man? There's no real. What is a prudent? You accept it for what it is. And as defense counsel was reluctant to use the word in this forum, I know that there are people who are sensitive to that, and I find that the display, I do consider the way it was described, it wasn't like when I play golf, it's used. This was intended to express a sexual conduct. So I find it to be in violation of the ordinance. So we'll take a vote on the motion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Nay.
All right. Motion carries with 2 negative votes. What we will do now are the parties for the cases before us that are not related to this present. One. Anybody else? Okay, we'll do your cases now, so you get a chance to go someplace else.
What is the case?
We're going to do F through L.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Before we start the next case.
Yes, Mr.
Here, go to the podium, please, sir.
I didn't think it was going to take up that much time. I can't say I apologize because this is an important case, but I need to get moving on this afternoon, and so does my clients. Mr. Sheets has another charge at another docket. Could we please continue those and put them on the same docket and come back another day?
Does anybody have an objection to?
I have no
granting
objection.
that
No
request?
objection.
I do.
Oh, deferred for next month? Is that what you're requesting, that we do that? October 18th, August 18th, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that sounds fine for me. Yes. Just put them all together, and there's other charges, and,
The ones that are remaining.
Yes.
We resolved 2 of them, we'll
Yes.
do the others.
yes.
Mr. Chairman, may I have a moment to speak with the officers to see
Sure.
if they have a problem?
Yes. Does anybody here on the board have an issue with that? Except John won't be here to enjoy the fun.
I
Kept our officers here all morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I objected postponing this. We're killing city employees' time, officers' time.
Let's see what Mr. Levin has said, since he speaks for the city.
I would recommend that if there's only one gentleman here for one case, then we move only that one up and then proceed back to the normal schedule.
I've got other.
I've spoken to the officers. First of all, Mr. Massey's can be excused because he's the only, I mean, we only have one case on his. And at least one of the officers may have a conflict with the next date, and so I'd like to get them in and out, and possibly, you know, we can, I'm sure the cases moving forward will be a little less lengthy if
Sure.
if we stick to the point.
Can you consolidate them? So that's all.
Could we do the one that the officer has a problem with and move the other one?
Yeah, but we have a gentleman here that's basically here for a case. I mean, I'd like to hear his case, and so he doesn't have to hang around.
The officer that has a problem has got 2 of the citations that are before you today, so we're not going to save a whole lot of time by bringing him up, so we might as well do all 3 cases now.
Can we do the citizen first?
What, can you do your citizen while he checks his schedule?
Sure, why don't we do that?
What,
You got 9 for another one?
I think so.
Okay. We will take, under new business, Number B, hearing officer, hearing citation, contest of citation, hearing case number 21-79900, police officer Russell Fiorino, respondent Andrew Brian Sheets, address of violation, right-of-way, West Olympia Avenue and Taylor Street, violation of Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13, Sub C 8, and violation of Chapter 26, Section 11.5, Subset Z, display of indecent signs. Is the respondent present? Yes. And the respondent pleads, get up, yes, thank you.
Not guilty.
Okay. Will the city please?
Yes, officer, please state your name for the record.
Officer Fiorino.
And were you sworn?
I was.
All right. And by whom are you employed?
Punta Gorda Police Department.
And what is your position with the Punta Gorda Police
I
Department?
work road patrol.
What are your duties and responsibilities on road patrol?
Protect life and property, enforce Florida State statute and city code ordinance.
And were you so employed on June 12th, 2021?
I was.
On that date, did you receive a request to respond to a potential code violation at the corner of West Olympia Avenue and Taylor Street?
Yes, sir.
And is the corner of West Olympia Avenue and Taylor Street within the territorial limits of the city of Punta Gorda?
It is.
And did you in fact respond to said request?
Yes, sir.
Are you generally familiar with the city's sign code standards contained in Chapter 26 Punta Gorda Code?
I am.
All right. On the screen is city's exhibit number 1. Do you recognize exhibit number 1 as the definition for the term sign is contained in the city's sign standards?
I do.
And I'll show you city exhibit number 2 and ask if you recognize exhibit number 2 as the definition of the term indecent speech as contained in the city's sign standards.
Yes, sir.
And I show you city's exhibit number 3. And do you recognize exhibit number 3 as one of the types of signs prohibited by the city's sign code?
I do.
I show you city's exhibit number 4. Does this photo appear to be taken from your body camera?
It does.
And does the photo appear to be an accurate depiction of the scene upon your arrival at the corner of West Olympia Avenue and Taylor Street on June 12, 2021?
Yes, sir.
Were you standing, where were you standing when this photograph was recorded?
I just exited the north side of the Wells Fargo parking lot, so that's the southeast corner of Taylor and Olympia, right there on the sidewalk, so I'm probably about 20 feet away from Mr. Sheets.
Were you standing within a public place at the time?
I was.
And who is the person in the black shirt facing you on city's exhibit number 4?
That is Andrew Sheets.
How are you familiar with Andrew Sheets?
I've had multiple interactions with him over the past year or two. He was I worked a couple cases involving him.
All right. And what was Mr. Sheets doing in this photo?
I believe he was protesting with his literature and sign and flag and shirt.
Is the photo an accurate depiction of the scene as you saw it?
It is.
And was Mr. Sheets standing within a public space?
He was.
Was Mr. Sheets holding a sign as that term is defined by the city's sign standards?
Yes, sir.
Is it your understanding that a flag is a sign as that term is defined by the city's sign standards?
It is.
Did the flag that Mr. Sheets was holding contain indecent speech as that term is defined by the city's sign standard?
It did.
And what word or words on Mr. Sheets' flag did you find to be indecent speech as that term is defined in the city's sign code?
The sign read, "Fuck Biden."
What was the approximate time of day of your observations of Mr. Sheets?
In the morning, I believe it was around 9:30 a.m.
In the background, there's appear to be a number of tents. Do you know what those tents are associated with?
Yes, sir. On the weekend, we have a farmer's market. They shut down Sullivan and, Sullivan and then also Taylor Road there, and they have vendors come in.
Based on your experience, have you observed children under the age of 17 attending the market?
I have.
And was Mr. Sheets holding his flag in an area where his flag could potentially be viewed by children under the age of 17?
Yes, sir.
I'll show you city's exhibit number 5 and ask what Mr. Sheets was wearing, shown in this photo.
He's wearing a black shirt that reads, "Fuck the police."
And is this photo an accurate depiction of the scene as you saw it?
It is.
And is Mr. Sheets' shirt considered to be apparel?
Yes, sir.
Is it your understanding that apparel upon which words have been printed constitute a sign as that term is defined by the city's sign standards?
Yes, sir.
Did Mr. Sheets' shirt contain indecent speech as that term is defined by the city's sign code standards?
It did.
And what word or words on Mr. Sheets' shirt did you find to be indecent speech, as that term is defined by the city's sign standards?
The word fuck.
Line when you wrote the citation as to whether or not the sign depicted sexual activity.
I don't think it would change my decision to write the citation, but
Okay.
I'll quote Mr. Sasaloto that it's a verb, so in my mind, it seemed like an action, yes.
Okay. Of those two choices, though, seeing the sign, what would you think somebody meant by that?
Said it seems like it's an action.
You really think so? Okay. Guess that's all I have there. I think the board may have some questions here.
Not yet.
I have a question. The sign in reference to the left of Mr. Sheets, is that also part of this citation?
If I, no, I
It's
don't.
unclear to me who's holding that sign.
No, it's not.
Yeah, and the
Okay.
gentleman in the orange wasn't holding it, but I don't believe it was. The thing that was on that sign was a bunch of stick figures performing sexual acts on each other.
Correct, that was my question.
For the record, the only violations are the shirt and the flag.
Not the
mask.
sign depicting sexual activity.
I know, I know.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I do have a follow-up question on direct examination. Does the word fuck connote to you a sexual activity?
Me? Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Chair, if there's no other questions, I'd like to make a motion.
Please.
I'd like to make a motion that the city has proven it has a prima facie case.
Second.
Motion has been made second that the city has established a prima facie case. Is there any discussion on the motion? No discussion? Have a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
One nay vote, the motion is carried.
So it's interesting, earlier, Massey brought up a good point I forgot all about. This is absolutely selective and discriminatory. We have tons of video of all these police officers right here seeing other people with bad signs protesting on 41, where tons of kids saw them. Multiple protests on 41. In fact, I was just at a protest in front of the police station, and I was censored because of your tyranny. I censored myself, but there was other people there with signs, and they did nothing. All they did was stare through the window, staring at us, and they did nothing. In fact, some of those people went downtown Punta Gorda, I'm sure you've heard, with their signs in front of kids everywhere with a bullhorn. I gave my bullhorn to my friend because I said they're sick of hearing from me. You make a statement. All these cops knew about it, drove by, and we have countless videos. There was somebody at the DMV, like Massey was just saying. There was, I think, 7 people there. All these bad signs, all these cops were there. Nobody got a ticket. I have all the videos for that. This is selective and discriminatory. So I want to, like I said, I want to agree with Massey. This is, you cannot have a law that's selective and discriminatory. I also want to make a point that he admitted to. So what he was mentioning is, what did the bottom sign say? Do you remember?
I don't recall exactly.
All right, so that day, I was making an interesting observation, just for him or whoever showed up. This sign says, fuck acronyms. Does anybody know what acronyms mean? Okay, that means F dot, U dot, C dot, K dot, for unlawful carnal knowledge. Everything, there it is, dot, dot, dot. There's dots here. If you zoom into the other one, there's dots on all of these. In fact, I have it on video. He admitted to me the next time he saw me, there you go. dot, 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 dot. In fact, he admitted the next time he saw me, he goes, I apologize. And this is on video, his body camera and mine. He goes, I apologize. I didn't realize you were doing acronyms that day. So, also, I need to make this statement too. I am not a rich person. I am lower income, and these fines are outrageous. What is the irreparable harm? What?
Conduct has already occurred, that's the problem.
What's
There's
that?
nothing- Your conduct has already occurred. There's no curative action you can take to prevent this violation that's before us.
And then how are you going to enforce this if I cannot pay?
That's up to the city.
Exactly. So how are you going to enforce this, Mr. Levin? All right, okay, I'm not going to go there. So this day was acronyms. I have him on video admitting. He saw the video later, said, shit, I missed it. I should have got it. And by the way, I said rip up a ticket. You wouldn't rip it up.
Can I ask you a question, Mr.
Yes.
Steeds? So again, the same question I posed to Mr. Massey, that you said all these other people had signs and the police didn't do anything. How are you aware that they haven't received warnings? Or maybe they have received warnings and they said, well, I'm not going to do it again. What proof do you have? I mean, you brought it up. so
Okay,
certainly
no,
you have
I agree.
proof to show
Thank you,
that.
thank you for asking. You know, like one person here got mad because I said that this is an extremely corrupt city, and the police department is because that's why I wear I wear multiple body cameras. Everybody that I know was out doing this, you know, trying to, you know, stop this insanity, they all wear body cameras. You guys wear body cameras. It is all fully documented. I could not believe it. We're at the DMV where I got that last ticket that you just nailed me for, $1,000. 7 people sitting there with all these fuck signs, and none of these guys gave him a warning. They let him go. In fact, they were even recording in that building with video, and Charlotte County says that's illegal, and they should have been trespassed. They wouldn't even trespass him. It's really weird. If Andy goes out somewhere with the camera, he's trespassed. If Andy goes out somewhere with a bad sign, I get a ticket. But nobody else is. Sir, you give me your email, I will send you every single video you want. And you're going to say, what's going on? You're enforcing it on Andy and none of these other people? There's so much video you have no idea about. All fully documented.
Why didn't you bring photographs with you?
I did not know that this was going to get this out of control. Really did not. I will swear on a Bible, it's real. It's not a joke. Ask them. Ask them. How many people have you seen that are protesting with these signs and you didn't do anything? There you go. There's your answer right there.
Not relevant to
Mr.
this
Chairman, the
case.
appropriate way of asking any question would be through the council.
Yes.
I mean, through the chair.
So,
It's not relevant
Yeah, if
to
we
the
could just
case.
get back to our procedures. They're presenting their
okay.
case in chief, so let's let him question his witnesses. and then
Are we all set? Any
cross-examine,
questions?
and then
Have you
board
finished with
Yep,
your?
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Officer, the minuscule little dots that are between the F, U, C, and K, were those have been visible by most passerbys?
No, sir, I actually didn't notice that they were there at all until he uploaded a video to YouTube later. The conversation he's talking about later, after I spoke to him, I did tell him I didn't notice them there, and they weren't visible on video. No times I apologize for citing him.
And so the letters that were clearly visible, was that word above where it says "the police"? Is that a word that you determined to be indecent under the city's sign code?
That's correct.
And that's what you cited him for?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Is there a rebuttal?
Some statements. I really hope that members of this panel, when you hear "fuck Biden," it doesn't give you any kind of sexual perception.
Is this your summary?
Yes. because that's basically what it would have to do to properly and fairly apply this ordinance. And, you know, whether you take this argument again or not, this is a record that may go before a circuit judge or an appellate judge. The obscenity, there was some questions here about obscenity. Retiring member here made, and he seemed to think obscenity and fighting words had something to do with this charge. Attorney said, hey, we're not charging him for that, but still it played in his mind, and he didn't want to isolate it, didn't appear to want to isolate it to that particular definition of indecency. So, you know, again, I can only urge you to consider the rule of law. Whether you like the colorful metaphor or not, we have to go by the rule of law. And the rule of law says, hey, if you're innocent until proven guilty. So if you want to put some guilt on him for obscenity or fighting words, you're not applying the rule of law. That wasn't charged. That is not on the table. If I'm wrong, object, Mr. Levin.
No, we'll stipulate that and have indicated on the record
So
that the
should-
notice of violation, the citation said indecent speech.
So
Indecent sign.
if you think it's obscene, if you think it's fighting words, he's innocent of that. I mean, at this juncture, he wasn't charged. Now, the obscenity case, Miller versus California, actually requires, trying to prove obscenity requires it to be proved that the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct. So, you know, as part of our constitutional argument, I'm not saying you can do this, part of our constitutional argument, the city has just simply taken obscenity standards and plopped them right into the indecency definition, just wrote them right in. Okay, well, that's not for your purvey, at least to decide, but what I'm trying to say here is at least this body can't determine the constitutionality. The body could apply, make some effort to actually apply the words, actual words, the unconstitutional words that are actually in the provision. Indecent speech depicts or describes sexual activity organ. Fuck Biden doesn't, unless you use a warped imagination. You said, okay? Please go light on my clients. They're here to make a point, not making any money off of this. They just want to stand for constitutional rights. This will work its way through. It's not going to help to heap a big fine on somebody that can't afford to pay it. So please, I mean, let's go $100 this time. You've already fined him enough. If you're going to fine him. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Then I'll entertain a motion as to whether or not we have a violation. And I will say before that, I'm sorry, I disagree with your position. I think the way the word was used is not just in general, like when I play golf and have a bad swing, but does in fact describe something sexual to be committed to a human being. And I don't think I'm such an idiot that I would make that mistake, but, so.
Sorry you say that.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry the way you would describe it, but anyhow, I will entertain a motion as to whether or not there is a violation of the ordinance.
Chair.
Yes, Mr. Weiner.
Motion to find that the citation, excuse me, is valid and the respondent did irreparably violate Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13, paren C 8, and Chapter 26, Section 11.5, paren Z of the Punta Gorda Code, in order that the fine in the amount of $5,000 be imposed, plus case costs in the amount of $7.41, and further order that the said fine and case cost be paid within 10 days of the entry of this order.
Motion has been made that the citation is valid and the responsible irreparably violated city ordinance and is required to pay a fine of $5,000. Is there a second to that motion? Is there a second to the motion? No second, the motion is not carried. I will entertain another motion from a board member.
I'll make a motion. Motion to find that the citation is valid and the respondent did irreparably violate Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13C 8, and Chapter 26, Section 11.5Z of the Punta Gorda Code, in order that a fine in the amount of $500 be imposed, plus case costs incurred in the amount of $7.41, and further order that the said fine and case costs be paid within 10 days of the entry of this order.
The motion has been made that the citation is valid, the respondent has irreparably violated ordinances of the city, and that he should pay a fine in the amount of $5 plus court costs.
No, I'm sorry, was that?
$500.
500, I'm sorry, $500. I misheard. $500 plus court costs. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion, and if there's no discussion, please
Discussion?
signify. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interject.
No, that's okay. I'm just going to restate what I said earlier. I don't believe that the city has established any community standard by which we can judge this, and for that reason, I don't think that there has been a violation of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to say that I think the fine should be the same as the first one.
Amending the motion? No. Motion stands, it's $500 fine. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those, all those opposed?
I'm sorry, I got it into myself. Nay.
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 Nay. 3 nays and 4 yeas. Motion's carried. Okay. John, thank you. Jay, thank you for your time.
Thanks. Wish I could stay for the rest of the fun.
Next case, hearing to contest a citation, case number 2179967, police officer Corporal Joshua Gerard, respondent Andrew Brian Sheets, address of violation 126 Harvey Street, violation of Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13, subsection C8, in violation of Chapter 26, Section 11.5, subsection Z, display of indecent signs. No, he's not even here. No, he's not here. Not here. Is respondent present? Yes.
Yes.
How do you plead to the charges?
Not guilty.
Not guilty. Would the city please present its case?
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you, officer, would please state your name and whether you've been sworn?
Corporal Joshua Gerard, and I have been sworn.
And by whom are you employed?
City of Punta Gorda.
And what is your position with the City of Punta Gorda Police Department?
Road patrol.
And what are your duties and responsibilities on road patrol?
Enforce state and city laws and respond to calls for service.
And would that include enforcement of violations of city code of ordinances?
Yes, sir.
Were you so employed on June 22nd, 2021?
Yes.
And on that date, did you receive a request to respond to a potential code violation at 126 Harvey Street?
I did.
Is 126 Harvey Street within the territorial limits of the City of Punta Gorda?
Yes.
And did you in fact respond to said request?
Yes.
Are you generally familiar with the city sign standards contained in Chapter 26 Punta Gorda Code?
Yes.
I'll show you city's Exhibit Number 1, and do you recognize Exhibit Number 1 as the definition for the term sign as contained in the city's sign standards?
I do.
And I'll show you city's Exhibit Number 2, and do you recognize Exhibit Number 2 as the definition for the term indecent speech as contained in the city's sign standards?
Yes.
And finally, I show you Exhibit Number 3, and do you recognize Exhibit Number 3 as one of the types of signs prohibited by the city's sign standards?
Yes.
I'd like to show you city's Exhibit Number 4, Does this appear to be a photo taken from your body camera?
It does.
And does this photo appear to be an accurate depiction of the scene upon your arrival on June 22nd, 2021?
Yes.
Where were you standing when this photograph was recorded?
I was standing on West Marion Ave, on the sidewalk near the intersection of Harvard Street.
And is that a public place?
Yes.
What building is that that's depicted on the left side of the Exhibit 4?
It is Punta Gorda City Hall.
And who is the person in the black shirt that's facing you on City's Exhibit Number 4?
That is Andrew Sheets.
And how are you familiar with Andrew Sheets?
Prior interactions.
In what regard?
I've responded to other calls for service involving him.
All right. What was Mr. Sheets doing in this photo?
He was standing there protesting. He had a sign that I couldn't see from where I was standing, a shirt that said "Fuck the police," and he was also playing either a TV or a speaker of some sort.
All right. Is this photo an accurate depiction of the scene as you saw it?
Yes, it is.
And what was Mr. Sheets wearing?
He's wearing a black T-shirt with the words "Fuck the police" in bold white lettering.
Is Mr. Sheets' shirt considered to be apparel?
Yes.
And is it your understanding that apparel upon which words have been printed constitutes a sign, as that term is defined by the city sign standards?
Yes.
Did Mr. Sheets' shirt contain indecent speech, as that term is defined by the city sign standards?
It did.
And again, specifically, what word or words on Mr. Sheets' shirt did you find to be indecent speech, as that term is defined?
Fuck.
Say it again, please.
Fuck.
Thank you. And was Mr. Sheets wearing the shirt depicted on City's Exhibit Number 4 within a public space?
Yes.
What was the approximate time of day of your observations of Mr. Sheets?
Approximately 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
And was Mr. Sheets wearing the shirt in an area where his message could potentially be viewed by children under the age of 17?
Yes.
Did you ascertain whether or not Mr. Sheets had previously received a citation from the city for a violation of Chapter 26, Section 11.5Z?
Yes.
And what were you able to determine regarding Mr. Sheets, and whether he had previously received a citation?
He had previously been issued a warning and a citation prior to my interaction with him.
In fact, wasn't Mr. Sheets issued a citation on June 12th, 2021 for displaying a sign with indecent speech within the city of Punta Gorda?
I believe that was the date.
I'll show you City's Exhibit Number 5. Is that a true and accurate copy of the citation you provided to Mr. Sheets on June 22nd, 2021?
It is.
I show you City's Exhibit Number 6 and ask, do you know what that paper is in Mr. Sheets' left hand?
That is the citation.
And is that the citation that you issued him?
Yes.
I would like to enter Exhibits 1 through 6 into the record.
Accepted.
And have no further questions.
Sir, if that sign had said, "What the fuck," and didn't say "fuck Biden," you'd still violate him on that, wouldn't you?
Yes, sir.
Or "fuck off"?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Those terms to you, "what the fuck," describe sexual activity?
As the other officer said, I'm not going to give my personal opinion on that.
Okay. I hope it doesn't. Thank you.
Do you understand? I'm sorry, go ahead. Are we finished?
I'm finished with my questions.
Yeah.
I'd like to go ahead and incorporate all my arguments into all this here, and it's all going to go up together, so trying to be briefer, more brief.
Do you understand that the word fuck is a word that describes a sexual activity?
Are you speaking?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
You do? All right. I have no further questions.
Any questions from members of the board for this officer? No questions. I will entertain a motion as to whether or not the city has a prima facie case.
Make a motion, the city has a prima facie case.
You want to read the magic words?
Oh, you said prima facie case.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Second,
Thank you.
Second, Jardina?
I'm getting tired. Motion has been made that the city has established a prima facie case. Any discussion on the motion? None? All those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No opposition, motion's carried.
Mr. Chair,
Incorporate your other statement. Just incorporate. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Just a second, Ed.
For simple purpose of this record, Mr. Sheets would incorporate his statement into this, what he's already said about the facts are so substantially similar. Is that okay with you, Mr. Levin?
Objection.
Okay.
Any,
And have,
any opposition to that from the board, or Mr. Wiener? You got something to say? Now that we've heard from
Not
council?
related to that, no, not related to that.
Any objection to incorporating the previous statements from the? We have to have a motion on that, or can we just agree
You
to
can
it?
just accept it.
We accept the previous testimony
thank you.
from Mr. Sheets.
All right, before you vote, I would just like to say one thing, and I appreciate Mr. Chairman finally talking about my argument. But could you possibly, Mr. Chairman, consider what the fuck or fuck off also descriptions of sexual activity? I don't think so. I don't think you could say that with a straight face. So think about that, because those are right similar words, okay?
May I respond to you? As I said before, I've heard that word. I am not that naive. But there are ways that that does describe sexual activity.
Okay.
And I said, in this case, is the way I find the word being used.
Understand, sir. I'm just saying, could anybody, reasonable person consider what the fuck a sexual reference? I don't think so, not in this day of age, okay? Now, also my point is, if you can apply that in constitutional statute so broadly, it's something that the courts really need to take a look at. So we thank you for helping us make the record. Thank you.
Good.
Now, if I might, Mr. Chairman, I agreed to accept the witness's statement, previous statement in the previous case in lieu of his live testimony right now, but I would ask to call him as a witness, or otherwise ask that the testimony and my questions posed to the witness in the previous case also be incorporated into the record in this proceeding.
No objection with it.
Anything that's, on point with this case, why not?
Well, I have no, that's what I'm saying, I want to make sure that his testimony in the previous case, particularly following my cross-examination of him, would be included in the record in this case.
Absolutely, that's fair.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I ask the officer a question, please?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lunny, can you go back to the picture of the sign that Mr. Sheets is holding?
Oh, he's not, we're not here on the sign that he's holding, we're here on his shirt,
The shirt, I'm sorry.
because the sign, we couldn't see what it said.
Okay. Officer, no, I need you to go back to the previous.
Okay, there you go.
Okay,
This is exhibit number 4.
okay. Officer, can you, with your finger, I think your finger might show up on the picture, point to the dots after F-U-C-K, please?
Well, first of all, his finger won't be able to show up on the record.
Okay,
And-
well,
but
let me rephrase it then. Can you see the dots, the periods after the letter, after the letters F-U-C-K on that shirt, from
can't.
where you're standing?
No,
If you moved 5 feet closer, could you see those dots?
no,
If you moved 8 feet closer, could you see those dots?
probably not.
are you talking about when he was on the scene? Not, you're talking about when he was on the scene, whether we'd be able to see those dots, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that was clear.
Yes. So just give me I mean, we're playing the word game here now, and everybody's having a good time. It's kind of like Wheel of Fortune. What would your first impression of that word, fuck, be as an acronym? Would you understand what that word meant as an acronym?
No.
And if you couldn't see the dots, you wouldn't know it was an acronym.
Correct.
Okay, I have nothing further, Mr. Chair. Well, that's standing on top of the man, so.
Well, and that's all I'm going to ask, if I may, follow up with
I'm
your
sorry,
question.
I'm sorry.
So here's a photo, exhibit number 6. When you were standing next to the respondent, did you notice any dots between the letters F, U, C, and K?
I did not.
Thank you. And how far would you say you were when you were standing away from the respondent?
Approximately a foot or two.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Any further questions from the board? If not, entertain a motion as to whether or not there has been a citation of a violation of the ordinance.
Make a motion.
Please.
Motion to find that the citation is valid and the respondent did irreparably violate Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13, parent C, 8, and Chapter 26, Section 11.5, parent C, Z of the Punta Gorda Code, in order that a fine in the amount of $500 be imposed, plus case costs incurred in the amount of $7.41, and further order that said fine and case costs be paid within 10 days of the entry of the order.
Motion has been made to find that the citation is valid and the respondent did irreparably violate the ordinances of the city of Punta Gorda, and that respondent pay a fine of $500 plus court costs. Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
Motion has been made and second. Any discussion on the motion? Call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye.
1 nay. Motion is carried. Next case. Contest of citation, case number 21-80024, police officer Corporal Joshua Gerard, respondent Andrew Brian Sheets, address of violation, right-of-way, Tamiami Trail and East Retta Esplanade. Violation of Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13, subset C8, and violation of Chapter 26, Section 11.5, subsection Z, display of indecent signs. And the respondent is present.
Yes, I am not guilty.
Would the city please present its case?
Thank you. Officer, would you again state your name for the record and indicate whether you've been sworn?
Okay. Corporal Joshua Gerard,
And again, by whom are you employed?
Punta Gorda Police Department.
And what are your duties and responsibilities of the department?
Road patrol, respond to calls for service, enforce local and state laws.
And were you so employed on June 26, 2021?
Yes.
On that date, did you receive a request to respond to a potential code violation in the area of northbound Tamiami Trail and East Retta Esplanade?
Yes.
Is the area of northbound Tamiami Trail and East Retta Esplanade within the territory limits of the city of Punta Gorda?
Yes.
And did you in fact respond to that request?
I did.
And once again, are you familiar with the city's sign codes contained in Chapter 26, Punta Gorda Code? And once again, I'll show you Exhibit Number 1, and do you recognize Exhibit Number 1 as the definition for the term sign is contained in the sign code?
Yes.
And I'll show you Exhibit Number 2, and do you recognize Exhibit Number 2 as the definition for the term indecent speech as contained in the city sign standards?
Yes.
And show you Exhibit Number 3. And ask, do you recognize Exhibit Number 3 as one of the types of signs prohibited by the city's sign standards?
Yes.
Show you Exhibit Number 4. And does this photo appear to be taken from your body camera?
Yes.
And does this photo appear to be an accurate depiction of the scene upon your arrival in the area of northbound Tamiami Trail and East Retta Esplanade on June 26, 2021?
Yes.
Where were you standing when this photograph was recorded?
I was on 41 northbound on the sidewalk.
And were you standing in a public place?
Yes.
Who is the person in the black shirt facing you in City's Exhibit Number 4?
Andrew Sheets.
And once again, would you testify as how you are familiar with Mr. Sheets?
From prior interactions.
And what was Mr. Sheets doing in this photo?
He was protesting, holding a sign that read "Fuck Biden," and he was wearing a shirt that said "Fuck policing for profit."
And was it an accurate photo of the depiction, accurate depiction of the scene as you saw it?
Yes.
And was Mr. Sheets standing within a public space?
Yes.
And was Mr. Sheets holding a sign as that term is defined by the city's sign standards?
Yes.
Is it your understanding the flag is a sign, as that term is defined by the city's sign standards?
Yes.
And did the flag that Mr. Sheets was holding contain indecent speech, as that term is defined by the city's sign standards?
Yes.
What word or words on Mr. Sheets' flag did you find to be indecent speech, as that term is defined in the city sign standards?
Fuck.
And what was the approximate time of day of your observation of Mr. Sheets?
About 2:15 in the afternoon.
Was Mr. Sheets holding his flag in an area where his flag could potentially be viewed by children under the age of 17?
Yes.
And do you have personal knowledge that Mr. Sheets had previously received a citation from the
Yes.
city for a violation of Chapter 26, Section 11.5Z Punta Gorda Code?
Yes.
And I'll show you city's exhibit number 5, and ask if that's a true and accurate copy of the citation you provided to Mr. Sheets on June 26, 2021.
It is.
Mr. Chairman, I enter exhibits 1 through 5 into the record.
Accepted.
I have no further questions and offer the witness for cross-examination.
The words, what the fuck or fuck off, if those were used on a sign, you'd violate them just for that as well?
Correct.
Okay. You don't make any independent determination whether the words as used to describe sexual activity, you're going by the police memo and the procedure, correct?
The word fuck is offensive because it derives from its sexual meaning.
Okay. I'm saying if we use a phrase like fuck off, is that a description of sexual activity?
The word fuck is, yes.
Even when used to fuck off? How about what the fuck? Does that describe sexual activity?
The word does, yes.
The phrase, does the phrase describe sexual activity? What the fuck?
I don't have an opinion on that.
Well, that's because the answer is no, right? Don't be afraid, just say no. Let's make a record here. No.
Well, first of all, I object to the arguing with the witness, number one.
Well, I'm sorry.
And number two, the phrase "what the fuck" is not in evidence in this proceeding. That was not what he was testifying about, and the sign did not include that phrase.
I will agree and sustain that objection.
Got that, counsel, but, okay. Apparently, it means one thing on the golf course and another thing on signs when you, in free speech context.
Is that a question, or are you arguing, sir? Because if it's arguing, I object.
Okay, I'll save it for argument then. Thank you. No further questions for the officer.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Lonnie, I wonder, I wonder if I could be present at the court case that
you're asking me?
Yes. I'm sorry, my former attorney. I beg your pardon. Mr. Levin. Is there a way that one or all of us can appear at the court case and hear this counselor, when he stands up in front of the judge, says, you know, that fucking code enforcement board.
Can we not
Stick to the case.
get into this rhetoric? Let's just stick to the case.
I'm sticking to the case. We're trying to make a word that's obscene, not obscene. I'm trying to prove a point here. If we can take the word out of context or make it say what we want it to say, I just want to be present at the court case.
Well, let's just analyze the facts before us and stick with that, please. Create a good record.
Anything at this stage? Anything more?
Let me just say something. I hope nobody takes too much offense. And I'm getting the impression that you guys think, okay, it's okay to say what the fuck you on the golf course and bandy about this language in your personal life. And then when somebody uses it on a sign in free speech, it takes on a different aura and a whole different meaning. What's with that? That's what you're expressing. That's what you're expressing to the appellate court. And the record is simply, you use this word in one context and you want to apply it in a different context when somebody uses it for free speech purposes. Some people express themselves that way. That's their expression. They say, fuck you, Biden. That's their method of expression. Doesn't mean anybody wants to have sex with Biden. I hope not. You know, it's the way they express themselves. Now, we've got the Miller language here written into this indecency standard, and that's an obscenity thing. Now, you know, that's simply the way this is coming across on the record. Now, hey, I'm all for cleaning the F word out of our language if we could, but that starts on the golf course. Tell your buddy not to use it if you think it's obscene. Hey, I don't like that word. People don't like to say it around me. They know I'm a good Christian. They look at, oh, I'm sorry. Now, if you can say the same thing, can you? That's what they said. You know, people don't like use the F word. They look at me. They know I'm a good church-going Christian. But the place to clean it up is right there at the golf course. Don't say it means one thing on a sign, another thing on the golf course. Sorry. But I'll say.
I find it offensive on the golf course, in the courtroom, and on a sign, so you can't speak to that for all of us.
Yes, ma'am.
If,
He didn't speak to you. That's what's been coming across from some of the members here.
Anything further?
well, we still need to hear from the respondent.
Oh, maybe we do the same thing, just incorporate his statement, his testimony. We'll incorporate yours with, let's move this thing on. Oh, he wants
I
to.
actually do have a statement on this
Go ahead.
that you guys are not aware of. And he is. So let's go back to where that sign where it was on the street. Isn't this weird?
That's
Remember I
Exhibit 4.
told you I've been with other people protesting? There's other people here protesting. And this, in my opinion, un-American policeman violating his oath of office to the Constitution and to the state Constitution for free speech didn't do anything to that person. And what you didn't see before I was there, there's another guy that was there that had "fuck Biden" flags all over his truck. All over his truck. And isn't that weird? Mr. Gerard only gave me a ticket. How does that work? Isn't that weird selectiveness, discrimination? It really is. This looks so bad for you guys in the next court. I mean, this is disgusting. We have all the video. I have video of that guy there. He knows he was there. Multiple other police, yes, she knows. Multiple other police officers know.
Ma'am, you're not a witness in this case, so you could be. You haven't been called as a witness, so please keep your comments to yourself.
Call me.
So you need to know that. This is one of those occasions, other people were there, and I'm the only one that got a ticket. And like I said, I protested with other people there before. Nobody got a ticket. I protested on the other side of 41 before. Everybody had the "fuck Biden" flags. Nobody got a ticket. But again, like I said, if Andy goes out with the camera, trespass. With the sign, get a ticket. And then an outrageous fine. That's it.
Sir,
Yeah.
since you're back up, what's your understanding of the word "fuck"? Is that word a word used to describe sexual activity?
It is not. This is a strong word for a president that's killing our country. Many meanings, period.
And none of them include a sexual activity?
And what's shocking is you told them that they could pass this when you know that this ordinance is completely illegal.
If I might.
Yes, you may.
And I'd ask him to answer the question that is posed before you.
It means many things. I am not talking about sex here. I do not want to have sex with Biden. I'm not gay.
Do you not agree that the word also has a reference to a
It
sexual
has
activity?
many different meanings.
Answer my question.
It has many different meanings.
Thank you. And one of them includes sexual activity?
It has many different meanings.
Yes or no?
It has many different meanings.
All right.
Thank you. We understand that your
Thank you.
speaks for itself. Any other further questions? If none, I will entertain a motion.
We have a witness. Another witness. What's your name? Nicole Christian.
For the record, my name is Nicole Christian, and I was duly affirmed earlier.
You were sworn?
Affirmed. Yes. I stood up. So I was there that day. I saw the officer walk up to him, to Mr. Sheets, and deliver the ticket and ignore everyone else that was there. Another gentleman was there flying the Biden flag. Another gentleman was there with a Trump mask and I won on it, and he was flying a flag, and I had 4 signs. I didn't use the F word because that's not in my vocabulary, but I said, words are art, stop the theft. Your feelings do not cancel my rights. Your political correctness offends me. And one more, can't recall it at the moment. But the Cantwell versus Connecticut, Cohen versus California, far back as 1944 in Baumgartner versus United States. One of the prerogatives of American citizenship is the right to.
Witness is not testifying
to
as
criticize
to facts in this case, but is making a legal argument based on constitutional challenges.
No, I'm just bringing up Supreme Court case law.
No, what we want from you is your observations on, that's what you're
Okay,
up for.
it was
that
selective.
day.
It was, first of all, the ordinance is void for vagueness, and all the officers have testified
We're asking just for-
that they use a memo to interpret it. So that's void for vagueness on its face. And then secondly,
Please limit your testimony
was
to what you observed. That's the issue that
discriminatory,
he brought you up for.
discriminatory application.
Thank
They
you.
singled out one man and ignored everyone else. They didn't warn us, they didn't fine us, they didn't ticket us, they didn't talk to us, just Mr. Sheets. They're targeting him. They don't like him bringing up uncomfortable things at the farmer's market or on the streets. And I think this whole ordinance was carefully crafted to eliminate his free speech rights, and I object to that.
Thank you.
Can I comment on that?
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah. I want to remind you of one thing when you talk about this word being offensive in community standard. This ordinance doesn't protect you at all, has no teeth, unless you're less than 16 years old, 16 or less.
17.
17, no, less than 17. I think that's the way it's written. But either way, that's not the point. The point is, look at the demographics of Punta Gorda. Hey, it's like 80% are over the hill like me. Okay? Even if it's offensive to you, this ordinance doesn't protect you. It's not written for you. Okay? Or at least it's not supposed to be written for you. Unless those words in it are just, hope the Supreme Court thinks these words are going to protect us from this unconstitutional ordinance. So the community standard, hey, the obscenity, if you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, you want to call it obscenity, you want to call it indecency. The city has acknowledged, by the way they wrote that you don't need to be protected from it, the sign. So how bad really could it be? How bad could it really be if nobody needs to be protected unless they're children that should be there at home, okay? Now, the Bible says you train up your children in the way and they won't depart from it. That's your job. It's not to protect them from a sign. If you've done your job at home, if you're there with them, making sure they don't type FU on the search, they're going to pull up all kind of flag. That is our job. Protect the children at home. That sign ordinance doesn't protect anybody. The job to protect the children is right there in the home. Can you do it? Well, you're not doing it. You're not doing anybody a favor by extrapolating a sexual meaning, extrapolating a meaning that's not there. Like fuck Biden. You won't even apply the words the way they should be applied. I've demonstrated that over and over and over. You won't apply the words the way they should be applied by the ordinance,
Okay,
okay?
I think,
And therefore, if I might make a final argument as well, and that is that this ordinance was created by the City Council of the City of Punta Gorda to protect children under the age of 17 from having to see offensive words and indecent speech in areas where the public has an opportunity to be around and don't have the opportunity to switch off a TV or switch off a radio. If there was a child under the age of 16 walking in this public place, there's no way to protect them from the offensive language that's indecent language that's on the sign. And that's the purpose of the adoption of the ordinance. City wants to be able to attract families with children. And so doing, want to be able to protect the children from having to be faced with indecent language that the community finds to be offensive. I mean, we're not here to talk about language on a golf course. We're here to talk about language on a sign on a public way, potentially visible by children under the age of 17. Thank you.
any further discussion from the board?
Well,
members?
I'd like to make a few points. According to the Defense Council, there is no limit to the use of the word. In other words, the word can be used anytime, all the time, anywhere, because it's an expression of free speech. So if you want to say "yup твою мать," which in Russian means motherfucker, you would accept that as expression of free speech and not indecent. I'm sorry, sir. I find that offensive.
Sir,
Well, I'm not asking you for, excuse me.
I'm going by the
May-
way the
Mr.,
definition.
can I please, it's the board's comments.
Okay, I just wanted to.
I wasn't asking if you, for rebuttal on it,
Okay, thank
that's
you,
all.
I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
Any other comments from the board? Then, at that point, I'll entertain a motion to whether or not there has been a violation of the ordinance.
Am I going to get to respond to it, to he stand up? Yeah, he asked me, you use the word,
I will let you do that, although I probably, since we were just having board comments, not rebuttal for board comments. But go ahead.
oh, well, thank you, sir. You know, the word motherfucker, that thing's thrown around all over the place. And hey, it's a really nasty word, but it doesn't conjure up.
Excuse me, but you have said this many times. If you're going to go back over how the words can be used, he expressed his views.
Understand he expressed. My point is, we don't go whether we don't like the word. We have to go by the way the ordinance is written. That's the rule of law. The ordinance is written, not our personal feelings.
And you've made that, which is,
Thank you.
sorry. So. Will anybody make a motion as to whether or not there has been a violation of the ordinance?
We need a prima facie case.
I thought we already did the
We did
prima
that.
facie case. Maybe with all the stuff that's going on, I'm losing track of what we're, didn't we vote on a
did.
prima facie case,
Yes.
council? We did. So we've had our discussions, both parties.
I will make a motion to find that the citation is valid and the respondent did irreparably violate Chapter 9A, Section 9A-13, C8, and Chapter 26, Section 11.5Z of the Punta Gorda Code in order that a fine in the amount of $500 be imposed, plus case costs incurred in the amount of $7.41, and further order that said fine and case costs be paid within 10 days of the entry of this order.
I second the motion.
Motion was made and second that citation is valid and the respondent did violate city ordinances and that is ordered to pay a fine of $500 plus costs. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay, will you get it right? Nay.
Aye, nay.
Nay, nay.
Yeah, nay, nay.
Motion is carried with one nay vote.
One more.
Okay. Moving on to the next case for the board.
Mr. Chair, can we have like a 2-minute break here? We've got to get some paperwork to the, to this last respondent
Sure.
before we bring.